You never remember anything important about me. Emily screamed, slamming the door in her father's face. But what she didn't know was that for 15 years, Richard had been documenting every detail of his daughter's life in secret journals. A ritual that began the night doctors gave his 5-year-old daughter 6 months to live. What will Emily discover in those pages that changes everything? Comment if you found something that transformed your relationship with a loved one. And subscribe now for more stories that touch your heart. Richard stood motionless in the hallway, the echo of her accusation hanging in the air. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the doorframe to steady himself. He hadn't forgotten her exhibition, he just couldn't tell her where he'd been. The memory specialist had been clear. The early symptoms might progress. Tonight, like every night since her diagnosis, he would write in his journal. Only now, for the first time in 15 years, he wondered if she would ever read the words he had carefully preserved of their life together. Richard made his way to his study, his shoulders heavy with the weight of Emily's words. The house felt emptier than usual, her absence amplifying the silence. He closed the door behind him and stood before the antique bookcase that dominated the wall. His fingers traced along the spines of leather-bound journals, each labeled with a year, 15 years of memories, documented with unwavering dedication. He pulled out the most recent volume and settled into his worn leather chair. The familiar creak as he sat down provided a small comfort in the midst of his pain. Richard opened to the last entry and ran his fingers over the page, his neat handwriting filling line after line. Emily wore the blue sweater I gave her for Christmas, he read aloud to himself. She mentioned being accepted into the summer art program in Florence. Must remember to help her with passport renewal next week. She prefers her coffee with almond milk now, not oat milk, remember this. The irony wasn't lost on him. He documented her preference for almond milk, yet she believed he remembered nothing important about her. Richard flipped back through the pages, seeing entries about her favorite music, her friends, her dreams, her fears, all carefully preserved. He reached for the first journal, dated 15 years earlier. The handwriting was more frantic than less ordered. He opened to the first entry, October 12th, 2010. The doctors gave Emily 6 months. 6 months to live. How do I compress a lifetime of love into 6 months? The specialist suggested we document our time together. Photos, videos, journals. Something. For me to hold on to after she's gone. But I can't accept that. I won't. Tonight, I'm starting this journal not as a memorial, but as an act of defiance. I will record everything about my daughter, every smile, every word, every dream. Not because she's leaving, but because somehow she's going to stay. Richard closed his eyes. The memory of that sterile hospital room washing over him. 5-year-old Emily, impossibly small in that hospital bed, her skin nearly as white as the sheets. The rare blood disorder had come suddenly, aggressively. The single word, terminal, had shattered his world. He'd started the journal that night, sitting beside her bed while she slept, the machines beeping a rhythm that counted down their remaining time together. One journal became 2, then 3, as the experimental treatment began showing results. Against all odds, Emily improved. The 6-month death sentence extended to a year, then 2. By her 8th birthday, the doctors used the word remission for the first time, but Richard never stopped writing. What began as preparation for grief transformed into a celebration of her life. Every milestone, every ordinary day, every small detail that made Emily who she was, preserved in his neat handwriting. He returned to the present volume, picked up his pen, and began to write. May 18th, 2025. Emily and I argued today. She believes I don't remember anything important about her life. She doesn't know about these journals. Maybe it's time she did. She accused me of forgetting her exhibition. I couldn't tell her I was at Dr. Winter's office, getting the results of my own tests. The irony is painful. I've documented every moment of her life because I was afraid of losing her, and now my own memory is beginning to fail me. The early onset symptoms the doctor described are already happening. How much time do I have before I truly begin to forget? Before these journals become not just a record for her, but a memory bank for me? Richard set down his pen and closed the journal. He ran his hands over the leather cover, feeling the slight indentation of the year embossed on the front. 15 volumes, 15 years of Emily's life after she was supposed to die. A miracle documented one day at a time. The question that had been circling his mind since their argument finally crystallized. Should he show her the journals? Would it heal the growing rift between them, or would she see it as an invasion of her privacy? He had documented not just her achievements, but her struggles, her heartbreaks, her rebellions, the raw truth of her life, seen through her father's eyes. Richard returned the journal to its place on the shelf and stood looking at the collection. Tomorrow, he decided, tomorrow he would show her. It was time for Emily to know just how unforgettable she had always been to him, with that resolution made. He turned off the study light and headed to bed, unaware that his carefully preserved secret was about to be discovered in a way he never intended. The memory came to Richard in his dreams that night, as vivid as if he were living it again. October 2010. A ordinary Tuesday transformed into the worst day of his life. 5-year-old. Emily had been tired, more tired than usual. The bruises on her arms and legs seemed to appear without cause. When her nose started bleeding during breakfast and wouldn't stop, Richard rushed her to the emergency room, his heart pounding with a fear he couldn't name. "Daddy, am I sick?" Emily had asked from the back seat, her voice small, a wadded tissue, pressed to her nose. "Just a little, sweetheart," he'd answered, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror, forcing a smile. "We're going to see some doctors who will make you all better." He remembered the waiting, the endless waiting. Emily curled against him in the hard plastic chairs of the hospital waiting room, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. The preliminary tests. More waiting? The moment when the doctor finally called them back, his expression already telling Richard everything he needed to know before a single word was spoken. "Mr. Caldwell, we've found something concerning in Emily's blood work." The words that followed, blurred together in a nightmare of medical terminology. Rare blood disorder. Aggressive progression. Treatment options limited. Experimental protocols. And finally, the devastating timeline. Without intervention, we're looking at approximately 6 months. 6 months. Half a year. 180 days. No matter how he calculated, the number was brutally, impossibly small. "There must be something," Richard had pleaded, his voice breaking as he glanced at Emily, who was coloring in a book. A nurse had given her, blissfully unaware that her life was being measured in months rather than decades. Dr. Abrams, a woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, had placed her hand on his arm. "There's an experimental treatment protocol at Boston Children's. I've already made some calls. It's a long shot, Mr. Caldwell, but it's the best chance Emily has." "Cost doesn't matter," Richard had said immediately, though in reality it did. As a single father running a struggling architectural firm, his financial situation was already precarious. But in that moment, he would have sold everything he owned, would have lived on the street if it meant saving Emily. The next few weeks passed in a blur of hospital rooms, consent forms, and explanations Richard could barely comprehend through his fog of fear. Emily, brave beyond her years, endured needles and tests and medications that made her sick, all while asking when she could go home, when she could return to kindergarten, when things would be normal again. It was during one of those endless nights in the hospital, Emily finally asleep after hours of pain and nausea from the treatment, that Dr. Abrams had found Richard staring out the window, tears silently streaming down his face. "You should try to rest," she'd said gently. "I can't." "Stop thinking about all the things she might not get to do," Richard had whispered. First day of school. Learning to ride a bike. Her first dance. College. I keep trying to imagine fitting a lifetime into... He couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Abrams had studied him for a moment. "I had a patient once, years ago." The parents knew their time was limited, so they started documenting everything. Photos, videos, journals. Not just for memories after, but because the act of recording helped them be more present, more aware of each moment they had together. That night, after the doctor left, Richard had gone to the hospital gift shop and purchased a simple black journal. He began writing, sitting beside Emily's bed, recording the events of the day, his thoughts, his fears, his hopes. He described the way Emily had smiled when the nurse brought her ice cream, how brave she'd been during the new treatment, the story he'd read to her 3 times before she fell asleep. The experimental treatment was brutal. There were days when Richard thought they would lose the battle, when Emily was too weak to lift her head, when the doctor's expressions grew grim. But slowly, incrementally, there were signs of improvement. Her blood counts began to stabilize. The bruising decreased. Her energy returned in small bursts. 3 months after the initial diagnosis, Dr. Abrams had entered their hospital room with the first genuinely hopeful smile Richard had seen on her face. The latest results are promising, she'd said. Very promising. I don't want to raise false hopes, but if she continues responding this way, she might have more than 6 months, Richard had finished, afraid to believe it. Potentially much more. We need to continue the treatment protocol, monitor her closely, but yes, Mr. Caldwell, Emily might defy the odds. That night, Richard had written in his journal with shaking hands. Hope. For the first time since this nightmare began, I feel hope. The universe gave Emily to me once. Perhaps it's not ready to take her back just yet. By Emily's 6th birthday. She was in remission. By her 7th, the doctors used the word miraculous to describe her recovery. The experimental treatment had worked where nothing else would have. Emily would need ongoing care, regular checkups, maintenance medications, but she would live. Richard had continued the journals, one for each year of her life that followed. What began as preparation for loss became a celebration of survival, a record of the life that almost wasn't. Every milestone, every ordinary day, every moment became precious, worth documenting. And now, 15 years later, those journals had become more than a record of Emily's life. They had become a lifeline for Richard himself, as his own memory began to fail him. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. He had documented everything because he was afraid of losing her, and now he was afraid of losing himself, of forgetting. The very memories he had so carefully preserved. Richard awoke from his dream of the past, his pillow damp with tears. He reached for the journal he kept on his nightstand and wrote down the dream while it was still fresh, preserving the memory before it could slip away. Emily sat in Zoe's guest room, staring at her phone. 3 missed calls from her father, no voicemails, just a notification. Staring back at her like tiny accusations. You okay in there? Zoe's voice came through the door, followed by a gentle knock. Yeah, fine, Emily called back, though she was anything but. The fight with her dad kept replaying in her mind. She'd been too harsh, probably. But the hurt had been building for months. The forgotten appointments. The blank look when she talked about her art projects. The way he sometimes paused mid-sentence as if the words had evaporated from his mind. He's getting older, Zoe had said when Emily arrived at her apartment last night, tears streaming down her face. My mom's the same way. They forget things. It's not just forgetting, Emily had insisted. It's like he doesn't even try to remember the things that matter to me. Now, in the quiet of the morning, her anger had cooled somewhat, leaving a residue of guilt. She needed more clothes if she was going to stay with Zoe for a few days, and her sketchbook. She'd left in such a hurry she'd forgotten it. I ain't going to swing by my house, she told Zoe on her way out. Dad should be at work. I'll be back in an hour. The drive home was quick, the mid-morning traffic light. Emily used her key and entered quietly, though she expected the house to be empty. Her father's architectural firm operated on strict business hours, and it was only 10:30. The house was silent, but something felt off. Her father's keys were on the entry table, his briefcase beside the couch. He never left for work without them. Dad? She called out, suddenly worried. Had something happened after she left? No answer. Emily moved through the house cautiously. The kitchen was untouched from yesterday. The living room empty? She climbed the stairs and checked his bedroom. The bed was made, but no sign of him. Finally, she approached his study. The door was slightly ajar, unusual for her father who always kept it closed. Emily pushed it open slowly. Richard was there, asleep in his desk chair, his head resting on folded arms. The desk lamp was still on, illuminating an open leather-bound book beneath his arms. Emily approached quietly, relief mixing with concern. Had he slept here all night? As she got closer, she realized the book was a journal. Her father's neat handwriting filled the pages. Carefully, not wanting to wake him, she leaned closer to read the visible page, May 18th, 2025. Emily and I argued today. She believes I don't remember anything important about her life. She doesn't know about these journals. Maybe it's time she did. She accused me of forgetting her exhibition. I couldn't tell her I was at Dr. Winter's office, getting the results of my own tests. Emily froze. Dr. Winter's? Tests? What are you talking about? Her eyes scanned down the page. Catching fragments, irony is painful. I've documented every moment of her life because I was afraid of losing her. And now my own memory is beginning to fail me. The early onset symptoms the doctor described are already happening. Her heart hammered in her chest. Memory failing? Early onset symptoms? Was her father sick? Richard stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Emily took a step back, her mind racing. She looked around the study, suddenly seeing it with new eyes. The bookcase against the wall was filled with identical leather-bound journals, each spine marked. With a year, 15 volumes, she realized, counting quickly. 15 years. Without fully deciding to do it, Emily carefully slid the journal out from under her father's arms. He mumbled something in his sleep, but didn't wake. She backed away, clutching the journal to her chest, her original purpose for. Coming home, forgotten dot back in her car, Emily sat with the journal in her lap, her hands trembling slightly. Part of her felt guilty for taking it, for invading his privacy. But a stronger part needed to understand what was happening. Why her? Father had journals spanning 15 years. What he meant about his memory failing? Why he hadn't told her he was seeing a doctor? She opened the journal to the first page. Dated January 1st, 2025. Her father's precise handwriting filled the page, describing their New Year's Day tradition of making Belgian waffles together, noting that Emily had mentioned wanting to apply for a summer program in Florence, recording that she'd worn the blue scarf he'd given her for Christmas. Emily flipped through more pages, her confusion growing. Entry after entry documented her life in meticulous detail. Conversations they'd had, things she'd mentioned wanting or needing, her schedule, her preferences, her moods, all recorded in her father's careful hand. It was both touching and unsettling. Why would he document her life so thoroughly? And why had he never mentioned these journals to her? The answer, she suspected, lay in the earlier volumes. Emily started the car. She needed time and space to process this, away from the possibility of her father waking and finding her with his journal. As she drove back to Zoe's apartment, Emily felt as though she was carrying something precious and volatile. The journal in her bag seemed to pulse with untold stories, with a version of her life and her father's back she had never known existed. Back in her room at Zoe's, Emily sat cross-legged on the bed and opened the journal again, determined to understand what her father had been keeping from her all these years. Meanwhile, across town, Richard Caldwell awoke with a start, disoriented to find himself at his desk. The study was quiet, sunlight streaming through the windows. He straightened, wincing at the stiffness in his neck from sleeping in the chair. He reached for his journal to close it properly, and found the desk empty. Richard's heart began to race as he searched the desk, the floor, the shelves. The journal was gone. And with a sinking feeling, he realized that Emily's keys, which normally hung by the door, were missing as well. She had been here. And she had taken his journal. The current journal had been revealing, but Emily sensed there was more to the story. She needed to go back to the beginning. "Hey, Zoe," she called out, emerging from the guest room. "I need to go back to my dad's house. There's something I need to check." "Everything okay?" Zoe asked, looking up from her laptop. "I'm not sure," Emily replied honestly. "I found something. I just need to understand it better." 30 minutes later, Emily stood in her father's study again. The house was still empty. Her father's car was gone from the driveway. He was probably looking for her. She realized with a twinge of guilt she should call him. But first, she needed answers. Emily approached the bookcase, examining the row of journals. Each was identical in design, differing only in the year embossed on the spine. She reached for the oldest one, marked 2010, the year she turned 5. The year she got sick. Back at Zoe's apartment, Emily settled onto the bed and opened the first journal with trembling hands. The initial entry was dated October 12th, 2010, the handwriting more frantic than the measured script she'd seen in the current journal. October 12th, 2010. The doctors gave Emily 6 months. 6 months to live. How do I compress a lifetime of love into 6 months? Emily gasped, the words hitting her like a physical blow. 6 months to live? What was this? She read on, her heart pounding. The specialist suggested we document our time together. Photos, videos, journals. Something for me to hold on to after she's gone. But I can't accept that. I won't. Tonight, I'm starting this journal not as a memorial, but as an act of defiance. I will record everything about my daughter, every smile, every word, every dream, not because she's leaving, but because somehow she's going to stay. Emily's hands shook so badly she had to set the journal down. 6 months to live. She had no memory of being this sick. Her father had never talked about it. She knew she'd been ill as a child. There were vague memories of hospitals. Of feeling tired all the time, of her father's worried face, but nothing about terminal illness. About being given months to live. She picked up the journal again, forcing herself to continue reading. October 15th, 2010. Emily starts the experimental treatment tomorrow. The doctors gave us the full disclosure of side effects and success rates today. The numbers aren't good, but what choice do we have? Emily asked if she could bring Mr. Whiskers, her stuffed rabbit, to the hospital. When I said yes, she smiled and said, then everything will be okay. If only it were that simple. October 16th, 2010. First day of treatment. Emily was so brave. She didn't cry when they put in the IV, just squeezed my hand and asked when we could go home. I told her soon, though I don't know if that's true. The nurses say her positive attitude is good. One of them, Sarah, brought Emily extra pudding cups. Emily shared one with me. It was the sweetest thing I've ever tasted, sitting there in that hospital room, eating pudding with my daughter, who might not see Christmas. Emily wiped away tears as she continued reading. Day after day, her father had documented her illness, her treatments, her small moments of joy amidst the pain. His fear was palpable in every entry, as was his love for her. November 3rd, 2010. Bad day. Emily's counts are down. She was too weak to sit up for most of the day. Dr. Abrams says this is expected with the treatment, but it's unbearable to watch. I read The Velveteen Rabbit to her 3 times today. It's her favorite right now. When I got to the part about becoming real through being loved, Emily put her little hand on the book and said, I'm real, right, Getty? I had to leave the room so she wouldn't see me cry. November 10th, 2010. Emily asked why she has to take so much medicine. How do you explain cancer treatment to a 5-year-old? I told her that sometimes our bodies need extra help to get better. And the medicine, even though it makes her feel sick now, is helping her get stronger. She thought about this and then asked if it was like when I made her eat broccoli even though she hated it. I said yes, exactly like that. She nodded wisely and said, I still don't like broccoli. First time I've laughed in weeks. Emily paused, shocked. Cancer? She'd had cancer? Her father had always told her it was a rare blood disorder, something about her immune system, not cancer. Why would he hide that? She continued reading, losing track of time as she absorbed the story of her illness through her father's eyes. The journal documented her good days and bad, the hopeful moments when her treatment seemed to be working, the devastating setbacks, the gradual, tentative improvement. December 25th, 2010. Christmas in the hospital. Not how I imagined our holiday, but Emily was feeling well enough to open presents. The nurses decorated her room with lights and a small tree. Emily said it was the best Christmas ever because the hospital makes the best chocolate pudding. I didn't have the heart to tell her it comes from a package. Dr. Abrams stopped by on her day off. She took me aside and said the latest results are encouraging. Emily's responding to the treatment better than expected. She used the word hopeful. For the first time, I'm afraid to believe it. January 15th, 2011. Milestone day. Emily's counts are stable enough that we can go home for the weekend. Just 48 hours, but it feels like winning the lottery. She wants to sleep in her own bed, have pancakes for breakfast, and watch movies with me on the couch. Simple wishes. I've never been more grateful for ordinary things. The entries continued, chronicling her gradual recovery. By March 2011, the tone had shifted from desperate hope to cautious optimism. By summer, Emily was in remission, though still requiring regular treatments and checkups. July 10th, 2011. Emily went swimming today for the first time since getting sick. Her laughter as she splashed in the pool was the most beautiful sound I ever heard. 9 months ago, I was preparing to lose her. Today, I watched her dive underwater and come up smiling. Dr. Abrams used the word miraculous at our last appointment. I'm starting to believe it might be true. October 12th, 2011. 1 year since diagnosis. 1 year they said she wouldn't have. Emily doesn't fully understand what today means, but I do. While she was at school, I sat in my car and sobbed, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. The journal I started as a way to hold on to her memory has become a chronicle of her survival. I'll keep writing, every day, documenting the life she wasn't supposed to have. Each entry is a victory, a defiance against what almost happened. Emily closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. She had no idea at all, how close she had come to death. How hard her father had fought for her, how miraculous her recovery had been. And she had accused him of not caring, of not remembering important things about her life, when all Along, he had been documenting everything, preserving her life story with devotion she couldn't have imagined. She reached for her phone to call him, then stopped. There was more to learn. The journals on his shelf covered 15 years. She needed to understand the whole story before she faced him. Emily picked up the first journal again, determined to read it all, to uncover the truth that had been hidden from her for so long. Richard sat in his parked car outside Zoe's apartment building, debating whether to go up. Emily's car was there, which meant she was likely inside. His missing journal was probably with her too. What had she read? How much did she know now? For 15 years, he'd protected her from the full truth of her illness. She knew she'd been sick as a child, of course, but he deliberately downplayed the severity, calling it a rare blood disorder rather than using the terrifying word cancer. He'd never told her how close she'd come to death, how the doctors had given her 6 months to live, how he'd sold their house and emptied his retirement account to pay for the experimental treatment not covered by insurance. He'd wanted to shield her from that knowledge, to let her grow up without the shadow of almost death hanging over her. But now, if she had the journals, she would know everything. Richard's phone rang, startling him. Emily's name flashed on the screen. He answered immediately. Emily, are you okay? Dad. Her voice sounded thick, as if she'd been crying. I have your journal. I'm sorry I took it. It's okay, he said, relief washing over him. Are you Zoe's? I'm actually outside. Silence. Then, you're here? Now? Yes, I was trying to decide whether to come up. I'll come down, she said. I need to talk to you. Minutes later, Emily emerged from the building, clutching his current journal. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. She approached his car and got into the passenger seat without a word. They sat in silence for a moment. Then both began speaking at once. I'm sorry. Why didn't you? They stopped, shared a small, awkward smile. You go first, Richard said. Emily took a deep breath. I went back to the house this morning to get some clothes. I found you asleep in your study with this open. She held up the journal. I read it. And then I went back and took the first one from 2010. Richard's heart sank. You read that one too? She nodded, tears filling her eyes. Why didn't you ever tell me about the cancer? About how serious it was? I didn't want you to grow up afraid, he said softly. Didn't want you looking over your shoulder, waiting for it to come back. You were so young you don't remember much from that time. I wanted to keep it that way. I had no idea, Emily whispered. 6 months to live. I can't even process that. Richard reached over and took her hand. It was the worst time of my life when Dr. Abrams told me the prognosis. I thought. He swallowed hard. I couldn't imagine a world without you in it. The experimental treatment, Emily said. The journal mentioned it wasn't covered by insurance. How did you afford it? Richard hesitated. This was another part of the story he'd never shared. I sold our house, he admitted. The one we lived in when you were little, and I cashed out my retirement account. The treatment was new, considered too experimental for coverage. It cost nearly everything we had. Emily stared at him, shocked. But we always seemed okay financially. I never knew we were okay, Richard assured her. After you got better, my firm took off. We did well. But for a while there, it was touch and go. Why did you keep writing in the journals after I got better? Emily asked. There are 15 of them on your shelf. Richard smiled faintly. It became a habit, I suppose. A good one. I started that first journal thinking I'd only have 6 months of your life to document. When you beat the odds, when 6 months became a year, then 2, then 5, I just kept going. It felt like each entry was a celebration, a record of the life you weren't supposed to have. Emily was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then she asked, what did you mean in your recent entry about Dr. Winters and your memory failing? Richard sighed. He'd hoped to protect her from this too, but it was too late for that now. I've been having some memory issues, he admitted. Nothing dramatic, but noticeable to me. Forgetting appointments, losing my train of thought, that sort of thing. Dr. Winters is a neurologist. I had been seeing him for tests, and you didn't tell me this either? Emily's voice rose slightly. I didn't want to worry you, Richard said. The symptoms are mild, might not progress further. But yes, that's why I missed your exhibition. I had a follow-up appointment with Dr. Winters. I didn't forget about your show. Emily, I just couldn't be in 2 places at once, and I didn't want to tell you about the appointment because I didn't want you to worry. Emily leaned back against the seat, tears streaming down her face now. All this time, I thought you were just dot, dot disconnected, not interested enough to remember things about my life. And instead, you've been documenting everything while dealing with your own health issues alone. I'm sorry, Richard said. I should have told you about the past, about now. I was trying to protect you, but I see now that wasn't fair. Emily wiped at her tears. I need to know everything, Dad. No more secrets, no more protection. I am not 5 years old anymore. Richard nodded slowly. You're right. Let's go home. I'll show you all the journals. Tell you the whole story. Even the hard parts? Emily asked. Even those, Richard promised Dot as they drove home together. Richard felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, the weight of 15 years of protective silence. There would be difficult conversations ahead, painful memories to share, but also a new honesty between them, and perhaps he thought Emily might help him document the days ahead, as his own memory became less reliable. Perhaps the journals that had begun as his way of holding onto her would become their shared record, a bridge between past and future. Dad? Emily's voice broke into his thoughts. Yes? I'm sorry I said you never remember anything important about me, she said quietly. I had no idea how wrong I was. Richard smiled at her, his vision blurring slightly with tears. It's okay. We're going to be okay. And for the first time in a very long time, he truly believed it. The house felt different as they entered, the same physical space but charged with new meaning. Emily found herself looking at everything through fresh eyes. The photographs on the walls, the comfortable furniture, the little tokens of their life together, all of it paid for by her father's sacrifice, all of it evidence of a life she wasn't supposed to have. Tea? Richard offered, falling back on the ordinary routines that had structured their life together. Sure, Emily said, though she wasn't thirsty. She followed him to the kitchen, watching as he went through the familiar motions of filling the kettle, selecting tea bags, setting out mugs. His movements were precise, practiced, a man who had trained himself to pay attention to details. I'm sorry I took your journal without asking, Emily said as they waited for the water to boil. I shouldn't have done that. Richard smiled faintly. Under the circumstances, I think it's understandable. I probably would have done the same. The kettle whistled. Richard poured the hot water into their mugs, added honey to Emily's the way she liked it, then led the way to a study. Emily hesitated at the threshold. This room had always been her father's private domain. As a child, she'd been allowed in, only when invited, usually to see some architectural drawing he was working on or to curl up in a big leather chair while he worked at his desk. As she grew older, the room had remained his sanctuary, and she'd respected that space. Now, entering with new knowledge, the room transformed before her eyes. The bookcase dominated one wall, 15 leather journals in a neat row. But there was more boxes on the upper shelves, photo albums, sketchbooks. This is all ... double quotes Emily began, gesturing at the collection. You, Richard finished simply. This is all you. Emily approached the bookcase, her fingers trailing along the spines of the journals. I still don't understand. If I was in remission, why keep documenting everything? Richard sat in his desk chair, turning it to face her. At first, it was superstition, I suppose, as if stopping might somehow jinx your recovery. Then it became habit, a way to process each day. And then he paused, considering. Then it became something else. A way to be present in your life, to really see you, to not take a single day for granted. Emily pulled the 2012 journal from the shelf, the year she would have been 7. She opened it at random. April 18th, 2012. Emily lost her first tooth today. She was eating an apple at breakfast when it happened. Her expression of surprise was priceless. She's been wiggling that tooth for weeks, but when it finally came out, she seemed shocked. I explained about the tooth fairy. She was skeptical but played along, left the tooth under her pillow with a note asking the tooth fairy questions about how she collects all the teeth, where she keeps them, whether she has helpers. I wrote back as the tooth fairy left $2 and a tiny jar of glitter. Emily was thrilled with the fairy dust this morning. Emily smiled, remembering the glitter. Jar? She'd kept it for years. She replaced that journal and selected another from 2016. She would have been 11, September 5th, 2016. First day of middle school. Emily was nervous but trying not to show it. She changed her outfit 3 times before. settling on jeans and that blue top Sarah gave her for her birthday. Made her favorite breakfast Belgian waffles with strawberries. She only ate half. On the drive to school, she was quiet until we were almost there. Then she asked, Dad, what if nobody likes me? My heart nearly broke. Told her that anyone who took the time to know her would find her impossible not to like. She gave me a small smile, then squared her shoulders and got out of the car. My brave girl, facing a new world. Called the office twice to check on her. They assured me she was fine. When I picked her up, she was chatting with two other girls. Made some friends, she said casually, as if she hadn't been terrified this morning. First hurdle of middle school. Clear. Emily looked up at her father, tears in her eyes. You knew how scared I was that day. I tried so hard to hide it. Richard nodded. I know you better than you think, Emily. Always have. Emily continued exploring. The bookcase, discovering not just the journals but other treasures. A box labeled Art contained her earliest drawings, from crude crayon scribbles to her first attempts at proper sketching. Another box held school projects, report cards, certificates. You kept all this? She asked, amazed. Everything, Richard confirmed. Your entire life. Documented. Emily's hand paused on a thin sketchbook she recognized. Wait, this is my old portfolio? The one I thought I lost before college applications. I had to put together a new one at the last minute. Richard looked sheepish. You didn't lose it. I borrowed it. Why? To make copies? He admitted. I knew once you sent it out with your applications, you might not get it back. So I took it to a professional printer, had everything scanned and reproduced at high quality. I was going to surprise you with the copies, but then you noticed it was missing and you were so upset. I put it back in your room the next day, pretended it had been misplaced. I still have the reproduction somewhere. Emily shook her head, torn between exasperation and affection. Dad, that was a lot of unnecessary stress for me. I know, I'm sorry. Not my brightest parenting moment. Emily continued her exploration, finding more evidence of her father's meticulous documentation of her life, school essays, birthday, cards she'd made for him, the program from her first art show in 10th grade, even a ticket stub from the movie they'd seen to celebrate her college acceptance. As she explored, Richard watched quietly, letting her discover the physical manifestation of his devotion. 15 years of memories preserved with love. I don't know what to say, Emily finally said, overwhelmed. All this time, I thought. I don't know what I thought. That you were just being a typical distracted dad, I guess. That your work was more important than my stuff. That you didn't really see me. I have always seen you, Emily, Richard said softly. Every day of your life has been a gift I wasn't supposed to have. How could I not pay attention? Emily sat down on the small leather sofa, processing. But lately you have been forgetting things? Important things. Richard nodded, his expression sobering. Yes, that's true. The irony isn't lost on me. After all these years of documenting everything so carefully, my own memory is becoming unreliable. Tell me about the appointment with Dr. Winters, Emily said. The one you went to instead of my exhibition? What did he say? Richard hesitated, then sighed. Let's look at the rest of the journals first. There's more you should know about the past before we talk about the future. Emily studied her father's face, noting the new lines around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands that she'd attributed to age but now wondered about. Was he hiding something more serious? Okay, she agreed reluctantly. But after that, we talk about Dr. Winters. No more secrets, remember? No more secrets, Richard promised. Everything in the open from now on. Emily reached for the next journal, ready to continue the journey through her life as seen through her father's eyes. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor of the study, surrounded by open journals. She'd been reading for hours, occasionally sharing passages with her father, who sat quietly in his chair, answering questions when asked, but mostly letting her explore the history of her own life through his eyes. The middle school journals were particularly revealing. Those years had been difficult, her first real experience with social hierarchies. Mean girls, changing friendships, and the beginnings of her own identity separate from her father. Listen to this, Emily said, reading from the 2017 journal. March 14th. Emily came home from school in tears today. Wouldn't tell me what happened at first. Finally admitted that Amber and Jesse excluded her from their lunch table. Told her she wasn't cool enough to sit with them anymore. Wanted to call their parents, but Emily begged me not to. Said it would only make things worse. Made her hot chocolate instead and just listened. She's stronger than she knows, my girl. By bedtime, she was planning to start a new lunch group with Zoe and Layla tomorrow. Resilience in action. Emily looked up. I don't even remember that happening. But I do remember when Zoe and I became best friends. It was in 7th grade. Right around then. Richard nodded. You bounce back quickly from things at that age. It was harder for me sometimes. I wanted to fight all your battles for you. Emily turned a few more pages. Oh my god, this is about my first dance. April 28th, Emily's first school dance. She spent 3 hours getting ready, changing outfits at least 6 times. Settled on the blue dress we bought last weekend. I drove. Her and Zoe to the school, promised to pick them up at 10 o'clock. Tried not to hover or ask too many questions. Emily rolled her eyes at me at least 12 times. As they walked into the gym, I caught a glimpse of my little girl transforming into a young woman. Sat in the car for a few minutes after they went inside. Tried not to think about how fast she's growing up. Picked them up at 10 o'clock sharp. Both girls chattering excitedly about who danced with whom. The terrible DJ. The math teacher's awkward chaperoning. Emily danced with a boy named Jason, trying not to overreact to this information. Emily laughed. I remember that, Jason Miller. He stepped on my feet the entire time. I remember wanting to run background checks on him and his entire family, Richard said dryly. Emily grinned. Then her expression sobered as she continued reading. May 15th. Emily asked about her mother today. Not the first time, but the most direct. Wanted to know why Jessica left, if it had anything to do with her illness. Hard conversation. Tried to be honest without burdening her with adult complexities. Told her that Jessica wasn't ready to be a mother. That the decision to leave happened before Emily got sick. Emphasized that it wasn't about Emily. That some adults just aren't equipped for parenthood. Emily asked if her mother ever asks about. Had to tell her no. That Jessica signed away her parental rights when Emily was 2 and hasn't been in contact since. Emily was quiet afterward. Went to her room to draw for hours. Checked on her before bed. She said, "It's okay, Dad. We're good. Together. Just us." Tried not to let her see me cry. Emily looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I remember that conversation. You were so careful with me, trying to protect me from feeling rejected. I hated that I couldn't give you a better answer, Richard said quietly. I always worried that not having your mother in your life left a hole I couldn't fill. You filled it, Emily assured him. More than filled it. You were enough, Dad, always. She turned back to the journals, finding an entry from 8th grade. October 12th, 2018, Emily's 8th cancerversary. Though she doesn't know we call it that. 8 years since the diagnosis that was supposed to take her from me. Took the day off work, told her she could skip school for a mental health day. She was thrilled. We went to the science museum, had lunch at her favorite sandwich place, saw a movie. Just the two of us celebrating, though she doesn't know what we're celebrating exactly. Each year on this day, I find myself holding my breath, counting blessings, marveling at the miracle sitting across from me, complaining about homework and quizzing me on movie trivia. 8 years. More than I was promised. Not nearly enough. Emily wiped away a tear. You did this every year? Took me out for a special day? Richard nodded. October 12th. Every year. My private celebration of your survival. I always thought it was just random dad-daughter days, Emily said softly. I had no idea. She continued reading, finding entries. That documented her first major art project, her struggles with geometry. Her first heartbreak when her 8th grade boyfriend broke up with her via text message. December 6th. Emily's first real heartbreak. Tyler ended things over text of all things. Found her crying in her room. She asked if something was wrong with her, why he didn't want to be with her anymore. Hardest thing in the world, seeing her hurt this way. Told her she was perfect exactly as she is, that Tyler was obviously an idiot. That one day she'd find someone worthy of her. She asked if that's what people told me when her mother left. Caught me off guard. Said yes, and that it was both true. And not helpful in the moment. That made her laugh a little. We made Sundays and watched terrible movies until she fell asleep on the couch. Carried her to bed like when she was little. Growing up is hard for both of us. Emily shook her head. In wonder, you documented everything, the good and the bad. That was the point, Richard said. To capture your whole life, not just the highlight reel. But why didn't you ever tell me about these journals? Emily asked. All these years, you've been keeping this detailed record of my life, and I never knew. Richard considered the question. At first, when you were young, it didn't seem necessary. Then, as you got older, I worried you might find it intrusive or strange. That you might ask me to stop. And I didn't want to stop. The journals had become ... important to me. A way to process my own thoughts about watching you grow up. About being your father. Did you ever worry I'd find them? Emily asked. Sometimes. Richard admitted, especially during your teenage years when privacy became so important to you. But you always respected that this room was my space, and I think part of me wanted you to find them someday when you were ready. Emily picked up the journal from her sophomore year of high school. April 3rd, parent-teacher conferences today. Emily's art teacher, Ms. Brennan, pulled me aside to show me Emily's portfolio. Said she has extraordinary talent, that we should be thinking about art schools. Emily hasn't mentioned this to me. Wonder if she's unsure about pursuing art seriously. Or if she's just keeping her options open. Need to find a way to talk about it without pressuring her. Want her to know I'll support whatever path she chooses. But also that I believe in her talent. Emily looked up in surprise. You knew Miss Brennan thought I had talent before I did? She didn't tell me that until junior year. She wanted to make sure you developed your skills without too much pressure, Richard explained. We agreed it was better for you to come to your own conclusions about your abilities. Emily shook her head, amazed. All this time, there was this whole other conversation happening about my life that I knew nothing about. Not in a manipulative way, Richard hastened to add. Just adults trying to do what's best for you. I know, Emily said. It's just strange to realize there was this whole other perspective on my life that I never had access to. Until now, she closed the journal in her hands and looked at her father. Thank you for this, for showing me. For keeping such a detailed record of my life. You're angry? Richard asked hesitantly. You don't find it ... invasive? Emily considered the question. Maybe if I'd found these when I was 16, I would have. But now? No, I'm just ... grateful. These journals are a gift, Dad. They show me how loved I've been every day of my life. How could I be angry about that? Richard smiled, relief evident in his expression. There's more to see high school, college, but maybe we should take a break? Get something to eat? Emily nodded, suddenly aware of the time. They've been reading for hours. Food sounds good. She agreed, and then we'll continue. I want to see it all, Dad. The whole story. As they headed to the kitchen, Emily's mind was swimming with revelations. The father she thought she knew so well had layers she was only beginning to discover. And her own life, seen through his eyes, took on new dimensions. New meaning, doubt what other secrets might the remaining journals hold. After a quick dinner of reheated pasta, neither of them wanting to spend much time away from the journals, Emily and Richard returned to the study. Emily had moved on to her high school years, finding entries that documented her increasing focus on art, her college application process, and the normal turbulence of teenage life. I still can't believe how detailed these are, Emily said, flipping through the 2021 journal. You recorded everything. Not everything, Richard corrected. Just the things that seemed important. Emily paused on an entry from her junior year. High school. March 10th, 2021. Got the call from Harrison and Myers today. They want me to lead the Singapore project. Career-defining opportunity. 3 years minimum, starting in August. Had to turn it down. Emily has 2 more years of high school, then college applications. Can't uproot her now. Can't leave her here alone. Martin was stunned when I declined. Offered to double the bonus. Arranged for Emily to attend the American school in Singapore. Tempting, but Emily's doctors are here. Her support system, her life. She's thriving after everything she's been through. Can't disrupt that, not even for the project of a lifetime. Some sacrifices aren't really sacrifices at all. Emily looked up, stunned. Singapore? You never mentioned any project in Singapore? Richard shrugged, because I turned it down. It wasn't relevant. But Dad, Harrison and Myers is one of the top architectural firms in the world. This would have been huge for your career. You were more important? Richard said simply. Emily stared at him, a new understanding dawning. Were there other opportunities? You turned down because of me? Richard hesitated, then nodded. A few. Nothing worth discussing. Emily turned back to the journal, scanning forward, looking for more mentions of the Singapore project. She found another entry a few weeks later. April 5th, 2021. Martin called again about Singapore. Offering partner track now if I reconsider. Still no. Emily has her first major art showcase next week. Wouldn't miss it for anything, let alone a building on the other side of the world. Buildings can wait. Emily's moments can't. Emily set the journal down, overwhelmed. Dad, this would have made your career. Why didn't you ever tell me? What would have been the point? Richard asked. To make you feel guilty about a decision I was completely at peace with? The choice wasn't even difficult, Emily. But your career? My career has been just fine, Richard interrupted gently. I've designed buildings I'm proud of, made a good living. Maybe I'm not internationally renowned, but I never needed that. I needed to be your dad here, present. That was always the priority. Emily shook her head, trying to process this revelation. I had no idea you gave up so much. I didn't give up anything, Richard insisted. I gained everything. Every day with you was the reward, Emily. Every single day. Emily wiped away tears and continued reading. She found more evidence of her father's sacrifices, late nights working, after she went to bed, compensate for leaving work early to attend her events. Business trips shortened or declined, professional connections maintained through video. Calls rather than travel. November 18th, 2021. Emily got her first college acceptance today. California Institute of the Arts, Toll Scholarship. She was jumping up and down when she read the email. I maintained my composure until she went to call Zoe, then sat in my car and cried. Not because she'd be going so far away, though that's part of it, but because this moment, this triumph almost didn't happen. There was a time when I didn't dare dream of Emily's college acceptances, of her grown-up life. Every milestone feels like a miracle. Called Dr. Abrams, who's retired now, but still checks in every year around the cancerversary. She cried too. Sad Emily's case is still used in medical literature, still studied as an example of the experimental treatment success. My daughter, the miracle, heading to California to become an artist. Emily smiled through her tears. I remember how excited you were when I got that acceptance, but I had no idea. That I was a sentimental mess? Richard laughed. Some things a father keeps to himself. Emily found an entry from her high school graduation day, full of pride and a touch of melancholy as Richard contemplated her leaving for college. Then she turned to the journals from her college years, curious about how her father had documented their time apart. September 5th, 2022. First week with Emily gone. House is too quiet. Keep expecting to hear her music, her footsteps, her voice. Called her twice, then forced myself to stop. Don't want to be that clingy dad who can't let go. She sounded happy, excited, a little overwhelmed. Exactly as she should be. Made dinner for one tonight. Didn't know what to do with myself afterward. Started a new design project to keep busy. Maybe I should get a dog? Emily laughed. You never got the dog. Came close, Richard admitted. Even went to the shelter once. But then I realized I was just trying to fill the Emily-shaped hole in the house. Decided to just live with the hole instead. Know that it was temporary. Emily continued reading, finding entries about her father's visits to California, his detailed observations of her. Growth as an artist, his pride in her independence. But there was something else too brief, concerning mentions of his own health that he'd never shared with her. January 28th, 2023. Dizzy spell at work today. Had to sit down in the middle of a client meeting. Embarrassing. Martin noticed. Pulled me aside afterwards, suggested I see a doctor. Probably nothing stress, lack of sleep. Don't want to worry Emily during her first year away. We'll make an appointment if it happens again. February 15th, 2023. Another dizzy spell. Worse this time. Made an appointment with Dr. Chen for next week. Still not telling Emily. She's thriving at school, preparing for her first student exhibition. No need to distract her with what's probably just middle age catching up with me. Emily looked up sharply. Dizzy spells? What was this about? Richard sighed. Turned out to be an inner ear issue. Treatable. Nothing serious. But you never told. Me, Emily said, hurt evident in her voice. You were in your first year of college, Richard explained. Finding your footing, building your new life. The last thing you needed was to worry about your old dad's minor health issues. That wasn't your decision to make, Emily said. I would have wanted to know. You're right, Richard acknowledged. It's a habit, I suppose. Protecting you. Not always the right choice, I see that now. Emily nodded, accepting the apology in his words. She continued reading, finding more instances where her father had sheltered her from his own struggles. financial pressures when a major client delayed payment, a minor car accident, a brief hospitalization for pneumonia. You went through all this alone, Emily said softly. While I was away at school, building my life, you were here dealing with everything by yourself. Not entirely alone, Richard corrected. I have friends. Martin and Sarah, Dr. Abrams, who became a friend over the years, your Aunt Maggie. But, yes, some things I handled on my own. That's what parents do, Emily. We manage so our children can fly. Emily reached for his hand. But I'm not a child anymore, Dad. You don't have to manage alone now. Richard squeezed her hand, emotion evident in his eyes. No, you're not. You're an extraordinary young woman, and I'm very proud of you. Emily returned to the journals, focusing. Now, on the entries from the past year, since her graduation from art school and return to her hometown. She found her father's detailed observations of her emerging career, his pride in her first professional exhibition, his quiet concerns about her adjustment to post-college life, and then she found it the first mention of his memory issues. December 12th, 2024. Forgot a client meeting today. Never happened before. Martin covered for me, but he was concerned. So it's not just the meeting. Small things slipping away? Names, words, where I put my keys. Made appointment with Dr. Chun for January. Not telling Emily yet. No need to worry her until there's something definite to worry about. Emily looked up at her father. Fresh concern in her eyes. This was the start of it? 6 months ago? Richard nodded. Yes, though looking back, there were probably signs even. Earlier that I dismissed. And now? What did Dr. Winters say at your last appointment? The one you went to instead of my exhibition? Richard hesitated, then sighed. We should get to that. But there's more in the journals you should see first. More context. Emily frowned. You're stalling, Dad. What are you telling me? I promise. I'll explain everything, Richard said. But let's finish with the journals first, please. Emily studied his face, noting the fatigue in his eyes, the slight tension in his shoulders. Whatever he wasn't saying, it was clearly difficult for him. Okay, she relented. But soon, Dad. No more secrets, remember? No more secrets, he agreed. Soon, Emily turned back to the journals, continuing her journey through the documented history of her life, the record of her father's love, and the growing shadow of his unspoken concerns. Evening had settled over the house. By the time Emily reached the most recent journal entries, the study was dim, illuminated only by a desk lamp that cast a warm glow over the pages. Richard had grown quieter as they progressed through the journal. His expression more guarded. Emily found the entry from 3 months ago, when her father had first visited Dr. Winters. March 10th, 2025. First appointment with Dr. Winters today. Neurologist? Referral from Dr. Chun after I described my symptoms. Did a battery of tests. Cognitive, memory, coordination. Dr. Winters was careful not to say much until results come back. But I saw the look he exchanged with his nurse. They're concerned. So, am my memory lapses becoming more frequent? Forgot Emily's birthday last week. Had to check the calendar. Thankfully remembered in time to get a gift. Make dinner reservations. She didn't notice anything amiss. Don't want her to know how frightened I am. The thought of forgetting her, forgetting any part of her life after I've spent 15 years documenting every detail, the irony, is almost too much to bear. Emily looked up sharply. You forgot my birthday? You've never forgotten my birthday. Richard nodded, his expression pained. I did. Not the date itself, eventually, but I woke up that morning and it didn't register. It took seeing it on my calendar to remember. That's why you were checking your phone so much that night, Emily realized. You had reminders set. Yes, Richard admitted. I was ... compensating. Emily turned back to the journal, finding entries that documented her father's increasing concerns. About his memory, forgotten appointments, misplaced keys, names that escaped him mid-conversation, moments of disorientation while driving familiar routes. April 2nd, 2025. Test results back from Dr. Winters. Not Alzheimer's, which was my fear. Mild cognitive impairment? MCI, he says. Possibly caused by small vascular issues, tiny, undetectable strokes that have damaged some neural pathways. Or could be early onset dementia, though he thinks that's less likely given the pattern of symptoms. Treatment options limited. Medication to improve blood flow to the brain. Memory exercises. Regular monitoring to track progression. Prognosis uncertain. Might stabilize. might worsen over time. When I asked about worst-case scenarios, Dr. Winters was evasive. I pressed. Could lose significant memory function within years rather than decades, he finally admitted. Cognitive decline likely to continue, though pace unknown. Drove home in. A fog almost missed my exit. The great cosmic joke. I've spent 15 years preserving memories, and now my mind may betray me anyway. Emily's hands trembled as she lowered the journal. Years rather than decades? Dad, why didn't you tell me? Richard sighed, rubbing his temples. I didn't want to worry you until we had more information. MCI isn't necessarily a death sentence, Emily. Many people live with it for years with minimal progression. But you don't know that will be the case for you, Emily pressed. No, Richard admitted. We don't know. That's why I've been seeing Dr. Winters regularly. Why I had the follow-up appointment on the day of your exhibition. We're monitoring, trying different approaches. Emily found the entry from the missed exhibition day. May 18th, 2025. Follow-up with Dr. Winters today. Had to miss Emily's exhibition. Couldn't figure out how to be in two places at once. And this appointment was too important to reschedule. New MR shows no significant changes from last scan. Good news. Cognitive tests show slight decline in short-term memory function, but long-term memory still intact. Increased medication dosage. Added new memory exercises to daily routine. Emily was upset about me missing her show. Can't blame her. Couldn't tell her the truth. Not ready for that. Conversation yet. Need to know more before I burden her with this. The look of disappointment on her face when I made my excuse, harder than any medical news. She thinks I don't care enough to remember her important moments. The truth is, I'm terrified of forgetting them. Emily closed the journal, fighting. Back tears. So this is why you've been forgetting things. Why you miss my exhibition. Why you sometimes seem distracted or confused. Richard nodded. Yes. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wanted to protect you, but I see now that I've hurt you instead. How bad is it, really? Emily asked. Don't sugarcoat it. Richard took a deep breath. The good news is that it's not Alzheimer's. The MCI diagnosis means my cognitive function is declining faster than would be expected for my age, but not drastically. I'm not in imminent danger of forgetting who you are or anything so severe. But, Emily prompted, sensing there was more. But it's progressive, Richard acknowledged. The medication helps. The cognitive exercises help, but over time my memory will likely continue to deteriorate. Short-term memory, first appointments, conversations, where I put things. Long-term memories are more stable, at least for now. That's why the journals have become even more important to you, Emily realized. They're not just a record for me anymore. They're a backup for your own memory. Yes, Richard admitted. I've become more diligent about writing daily, documenting everything I don't want to lose. Your life. Our life together. Emily reached for her father's hand. I wish you had told me, Dad. I could have been helping you, supporting you. I know, Richard said. I just ... I've been your protector for so long. It's hard to reverse those roles. It's not reversing, Emily insisted. It's sharing. Partners. We face things together now. Richard smiled faintly. You're right. I see. That now? Emily hesitated, then asked the question that had been forming in her mind. What happens next? With your treatment? More tests. More monitoring. Adjusting medications as needed. There are some experimental treatments Dr. Winters mentioned, but they're in early stages, not yet approved. Like the treatment that saved me, Emily said softly. Similar concept, yes. Though with less dramatic results expected. We're talking about slowing decline, not curing anything. Emily nodded, processing this. I want to come with you to your next appointment. Meet Dr. Winters. Understand the full picture. I'd like that, Richard said, surprising her. It would be good to have another set of ears. Sometimes I miss details. Or forget questions I meant to ask. Emily squeezed his hand. We'll figure this out together, Dad. Just like you figured out how to help me when I was sick. Richard's eyes grew moist. You were always the stronger one, Emily. Even at 5 years old, facing cancer, you had more courage than I did. I learned. From the best, Emily said. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of these revelations settling between them. Then Emily spoke again. I think we need a new system. Something to help you remember important things without having to rely only on the journals. What did you have in mind? Richard asked. I'm not sure yet. But I'm good at organizing, at systems. And I know you better than anyone. We'll figure it out. Richard nodded, visibly moved by her determination. Thank you. Emily looked at the row of journals on the shelf, 15 years of memories preserved in her father's handwriting. Maybe it's time I started my own journal, she said thoughtfully. About you. About us. I'd like that, Richard said simply. Outside, the last light of day had faded, but inside the study, father and daughter sat together in the warm lamp glow. No longer separated by secrets, facing an uncertain future with newfound honesty and shared strength. The next morning, Emily woke early. She'd insisted on staying at her father's house rather than returning to Zoe's apartment. Unwilling to leave him alone after everything she'd learned, she lay in her childhood bed, staring at the familiar ceiling, processing the revelations of the previous day, thought her father was sick. Not terminally ill, not immediately in danger, but facing a progressive condition that would gradually steal his memories, the very things he had worked so hard to preserve. Emily got up and padded quietly to the kitchen. To her surprise, Richard was already there, making coffee. Morning, he said with a small smile. I thought you'd sleep later. Too much on my mind, Emily admitted. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months, Richard said. It's a relief, having everything in the open now. They moved around the kitchen in companionable silence, preparing breakfast together with the easy rhythm of long familiarity. As they sat down to eat, Emily spoke. I want to go back to the journals today. There's more I want to understand. Richard nodded. Of course. After breakfast, they returned to the study. Emily had been thinking about which period of her life she wanted to explore next, and she knew exactly which journals to pull from the shelf. My high school years, she said, selecting volumes from 2019 through 2022. I wasn't the easiest teenager. I want to see that time from your perspective. Richard chuckled. No, you weren't the easiest, but not the worst either. Emily settled on the couch with the journals, opening the one from her freshman year of high school. She found entries documenting her increasing independence, her resistance to her father's rules, the beginning of what her father apparently termed her rebellion phase. September 18th, 2019. First real argument about curfew today. Emily wants to stay out until midnight with her friends on weekends. Compromised on 11 p.m., which she declared totally unfair and treating her like a baby. Slammed her bedroom door hard enough to knock a picture off the wall in the hallway. Teenage years officially upon us. Trying to remember that her pushing boundaries is normal, healthy development. Still, it's a jolt after years of relatively smooth sailing. Need to find the balance between protecting her and letting her grow. Emily smiled ruefully. I was such a brat about that curfew. You were testing limits, Richard said. It's what teenagers do. Emily continued reading, finding entries that documented her first serious boyfriend, her father's concerns, and his efforts to respect her. Growing independence while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. November 8th, 2019. Emily introduced me to Jake today. Her first official boyfriend, apparently. Tall, lanky basketball player. Seemed polite enough, if a bit monosyllabic. Resisted the urge to give him the third degree or clean my non-existent shotgun in front of him. Emily was clearly nervous. About the introduction, watching my reaction carefully. Made small talk about basketball, his classes, tried to put them both at ease. After he left, Emily asked what I thought. Said he seemed nice. She looked relieved. Didn't tell her I've already. Run his name through every search engine and social media platform available. No red flags, decent student, comes from a good family. Still planning to have Sarah's husband, the police officer, run an unofficial background check. Some things a father does quietly. Emily laughed out loud. You ran background checks on? My boyfriends? Richard looked slightly sheepish. Not extensive ones, just basic due diligence. Dad, that's so invasive. It was my job to keep you safe, Richard said, unrepentant. Besides, I never interfered unless there was a genuine reason for concern. Was there ever? Emily asked, curious despite herself. Once, Richard admitted. That boy from your junior year, Travis. He had a sealed juvenile record. Nothing violent. Just some vandalism and trespassing. I kept a closer eye on that relationship. Travis broke up with me after 3 weeks, Emily recalled. Yes, he did, Richard said, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Dad, did you have something to do with that? Let's just say I had a friendly conversation with him after I drove past the two of you parked at the lake after curfew. Oh my God, Emily groaned. covering her face. I can't believe you. She turned back to the journals, both mortified and amused by her father's behind-the-scenes management of her teenage life. She found entries about their biggest conflicts, arguments about her clothing choices, her friend group, her study habits, her increasing desire for privacy. February 20th, 2020, found Emily's art journal while putting away laundry. Didn't mean to invade her privacy, but it fell open when I set the clothes on her bed. Drawings inside were disturbing, dark imagery, some self-harm themes. Not sure how to approach this. If I admit I saw the journal, she'll see it as a violation. If I don't, I might miss signs she's struggling. Called Dr. Matthews for advice. She suggested creating space for open conversation without revealing I saw the journal. Said teen art often explores dark themes without indicating actual self-harm. Intent. We'll try to check in more, be available, watch for other warning signs. Parenting a teenager is like navigating a minefield blindfolded. Emily looked up, surprised. You found that old journal? With all the angsty drawings? Richard nodded. Accidentally. Yes. It worried me. That was just art, Dad. I was experimenting. With different styles, working through normal teenage emotions. I wasn't suicidal or anything. I know that now, Richard said. But at the time, it was frightening to see those images created by my daughter. After everything we'd been through with your illness, the thought of you hurting yourself was unbearable. Emily softened. I never knew you worried about that. There's a lot I worried about that I never shared with you, Richard said. Emily continued reading, finding an entry about one of their worst fights when she was 16. April 30th, 2020. Emily didn't come home after school. No call, no text. Found her at Zoe's house at 9 p.m. after hours of frantic searching, dozens of unanswered calls. She was fine working on a project, phone died, lost track of time. Lost? My temper completely when I saw her, shouted things I regret. Emily shouted back, said I was suffocating her, that she couldn't breathe in our house anymore, that she was counting the days until college when she could escape. Drove home in silence. She went straight to her room, locked the door, sat in the kitchen until midnight, trying to calm down, trying to understand her perspective. Finally wrote her a note, slid it under her door, apologized for overreacting. Explained that my fear comes from love, that I don't want to suffocate her, but I need to know she's safe. Found the note this morning on my pillow with her own apology added at the bottom. Progress, of a sort. This phase of parenting requires a kind of letting go I wasn't prepared for. Emily remembered that fight vividly. It had been their worst. Only time she could recall her father truly losing his temper with her. I was horrible that day, she said quietly. I knew you'd be worried, but I was so caught up in my own world, so determined to prove my independence. We were both wrong, Richard said. I overreacted, you were irresponsible. But we found our way back to each other. We always did, Emily said, smiling softly. She continued through the high school journals, finding entries that documented her academic successes, her growing passion for art, her evolving friend group, her application to art schools. Through it all, her father's pride in her was evident, even when he disagreed with her choices or was hurt by her words. June 10th, 2022. Emily's high school graduation today. Can hardly believe we're here, my little girl in cap and gown, heading to college in the fall. She looks so grown up, so confident accepting her diploma. Found myself thinking of all the moments that led to this one, her first day of kindergarten, learning to ride a bike, her cancer diagnosis and recovery. Every ordinary day that became extraordinary because she was there to live it. After the ceremony, she hugged me and whispered, "We did it, Dad." Not sure if she meant high school or the longer journey from sick little girl to thriving young woman. Either way, she's right. We did it together. Whatever comes next, we've already beaten the odds. Emily closed the journal, wiping away tears. You never told me how hard the teenage years were for you. They're hard for every parent, Richard said, but worth it. Even when I was at my worst, when I said hurtful things, pushed you away, slammed doors. Even then, Richard assured her. Because I always knew who you really were underneath the teenage drama. The same brave, kind, remarkable person you'd been as a child. The same person you are now. Emily set the journal aside and moved to sit beside her father in his desk chair. She leaned her head against his shoulder, as she had done countless times throughout her childhood. Thank you for letting me be difficult, she said. Forgiving. Me space to figure things out, even when it was hard for you. Richard put his arm around her. That's what parents do. We hold on tight when we need to, and we let go when you need us to. Sometimes we get it wrong, but we're always trying to get it right. They sat together in comfortable silence, both reflecting on the journey they had taken together, from her illness to her rebellion to their current crossroads. Facing a new challenge that would require them both to be strong in different ways. After lunch, Emily returned to the journals, curious to explore her father's perspective on her development as an artist. She selected the volumes that spanned from her early high school years through college, when her artistic identity had taken shape. I always thought you were just being a supportive dad about my art, Emily said as she opened the journal from her sophomore year of high school. But now I'm wondering if there was more to it. Richard smiled. Read and find out. Emily found an entry from when she was 15, the first time her artwork had been selected for a school exhibition. November 12th, 2019. Emily's self-portrait was selected for the school art show. She's trying to act casual about it, but I can tell she's excited. Went to the art supply store today while she was at school, bought her the professional colored pencils she's been eyeing. The look on her face when I gave them to her worth every penny. Later, found her in her room, completely absorbed in drawing, those new pencils spread around her. Stood in the doorway watching for a few minutes before she noticed me. There's something about seeing your child deeply engaged in creating something, a kind of parental pride that's hard to describe. Different from pride in grades or achievements. Pride in seeing them become themselves. Emily smiled. I still have those colored pencils. They're in my studio. I know, Richard said. I noticed them when I visited last month. Emily continued reading, finding entries that documented her father's growing awareness of her talent, his research into art programs, his quiet support of her developing passion. March 3rd, 2020. Parent-teacher conferences today. Ms. Brennan pulled me aside after we finished discussing Emily's progress. She showed me a portfolio of Emily's work that I hadn't seen before, more experimental pieces than what Emily brings home. Miss Brennan believes Emily has exceptional talent. Urged me to consider specialized summer programs, possibly art school, after graduation. Emily hasn't mentioned these ambitions to me, wondering if she's unsure about pursuing art seriously, or if she's worried about my reaction. Need to find ways to show her I support this path without pushing. Called Sarah afterward for advice. She suggested exposing Emily to more art, taking her to museums, introducing her to working artists who could serve as mentors, making a plan. Emily looked up, surprised. So that museum trip to Chicago, the studio tours, that wasn't random. That was you trying to nurture my interest in art? Richard nodded. With some guidance from Ms. Brennan. She thought you needed. To see real working artists, understand what that life could look like. And you were okay with me pursuing art? Really? You never pushed me towards something more practical. Why would I? Richard asked, genuinely puzzled. You had a clear passion and talent. My job was to support that, not redirect it. Emily shook her head, amazed. A lot of parents would have pushed for a more reliable career path. Maybe, Richard acknowledged. But I'd already watched you fight for your life once. Everything after that was yours to choose. Emily found entries about art competitions her father had encouraged her to enter, portfolio reviews he'd arranged with friends in creative fields, art books he'd researched and purchased. She found an especially touching entry from her junior year of high school, May 15th, 2021. Found Emily's discarded sketches in the recycling bin. She's working on her portfolio for summer program applications, apparently dissatisfied with these attempts. Rescued them after she went to bed. They're beautiful. She's too critical of her own work. Started a collection of these discards and a portfolio in my closet. Someday, when she's a successful artist, these early works will be meaningful to her. Or perhaps just to me. Either way, I can't bear to see them thrown away. You kept my discarded work? Emily asked, astonished. Still have it, Richard admitted. In a portfolio box in my closet. Several years' worth. Dad, I don't know whether to be touched or creeped out, Richard laughed. Your talent was evident even in your failures. Emily, I couldn't let them be thrown away. Emily shook her head, half exasperated, half moved by this revelation. She continued reading, finding entries that chronicled her college application process, her father's behind-the-scenes research into art schools, his careful financial planning. To make her education possible, December 12th, 2021, Emily received acceptance to Rhode Island School of Design today. No scholarship, unlike CalArts. She's torn between programs. Our ISD has the prestige, but CalArts has the financial support. Haven't told her that money shouldn't be the deciding factor. The house is almost paid off. There's the education fund. I've been building since her recovery. If RISD is where she wants to go, we'll make it work. Her happiness and fulfillment matter more than financial comfort. After everything, how could it be otherwise? Emily looked up, stunned. You would have paid for RSD? That's over $60,000 a year, Dad. If it had been the right place for you, yes, Richard said simply. But you chose CalArts on your own, and it was the right choice. I chose it because of the scholarship, Emily admitted. I didn't want to burden you financially. I know, Richard said. That's why I never pushed. But I want you to know the option was there. Emily was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then she returned to the journals, finding entries that documented her college years from her father's perspective, his pride in her growing skills, his careful attention during video calls as she showed him her latest projects, his visits to California to see her student exhibitions. October 20th, 2023, Emily's junior year exhibition at CalArts today. Flew in yesterday to surprise her. The look on her face when she saw me standing in the gallery, worth every minute of the uncomfortable flight and overpriced hotel. Her work has matured remarkably in the past year. Technical skill catching up to her creative vision. Noticed several gallery owners taking notes at her installation. One gave me his card when he saw me talking with her, asked if I was her father. Said Emily has a unique perspective, and he'd like to talk with her about her plans after graduation. Passed the card to Emily, tried not to show how thrilled I was. This is happening, her dream taking shape. Cancer couldn't take her future. Now she's claiming it, brush stroke by brush stroke. Emily remembered that exhibition clearly, the surprise of seeing her father there. The gallery owner, who later offered her her first professional showing. She had no idea her father had made the connection. You never told me that gallery owner approached you first, she said. Would it have mattered? Richard asked. He was interested in your work, not in me. Still, you facilitated that connection. I was just the messenger. Richard insisted. Your talent did the rest. Emily continued reading, finding entries about her senior thesis project, her graduation, her father's pride, and his quiet concerns as she prepared to enter the art world professionally. May 25th, 2024, Emily's graduation day. 4 years of art. School completed. Her senior thesis project received the department award. Watched her cross the stage in cap and gown, thought my heart might burst with pride. After the ceremony, her professors sought me out to tell me about her potential, her unique voice as an artist, as if I needed telling. I've watched that voice develop since she first held a crayon. Now she's heading back home, planning to establish her studio, build her portfolio, launch her career, offered to help financially while she gets established. She declined, determined to make it on her own. Stubborn independence, wonder where she gets that. We'll find ways to support without undermining her autonomy. This next chapter will have its challenges, but after everything she's overcome, an art career seems eminently conquerable. The journal entries continued, documenting Emily's return home, her struggle to establish herself professionally, her father's observations of her work evolving in new directions. He'd noted exhibition opportunities he'd discovered but hadn't mentioned to her, wanting her to find her own path. He'd recorded conversations with art world connections he'd quietly cultivated over the years. People who might help Emily's career without making her feel she was succeeding through nepotism. February 10th, 2025, Emily's been struggling lately. Rejection from the Westfield Gallery hit her hard. Found her sketches becoming darker, more frustrated. Resisting the urge to intervene, pull strings, make calls. She needs to find her own way through this. Artist's journey includes rejection, redirection. Still, it's difficult to watch her doubt herself. Invited her to dinner, asked casual questions about her current projects. Her eyes lit up as she described new ideas, directions she's exploring. The passion is still there, undimmed. She finds her path. My job now is to believe in her, especially when she struggles to believe in herself. Emily closed the journal, overwhelmed by the extent of her father's support, his careful attention to her artistic development, his faith in her. Talent even when she doubted herself. You've been my greatest champion, she said softly. All this time, in ways I never even realized. That's what parents do, Richard said simply. We believe in our children's dreams, sometimes before they fully believe in themselves. Even when those dreams seem impractical, even when the path is uncertain. Especially then, Richard said. Security is overrated, Emily. Passion, purpose, those are the things worth pursuing. I learned that when you were sick. Nothing matters more than living a life that feels meaningful. Emily set the journal aside and moved to hug her father. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. For giving me the freedom to find my way even while you were watching so carefully, supporting so completely. Richard held her tight. You've always been the artist in the family, Emily. But these journals, they're my creative work. My life's project, documenting the miracle of you. Emily pulled back, wiping away tears. And now I need to help you preserve those memories as they become less reliable in your mind. Richard nodded, his expression sobering. Yes, I'd like that. Tell me more about what Dr. Winters said, Emily urged. I want to understand exactly what we're facing. Richard hesitated, then nodded. All right, it's time you knew everything. As the afternoon light slanted through the study windows, father and daughter sat together, the journals surrounding them like a physical manifestation of their shared history. Preparing to face the next challenge in their journey together, Richard stood and stretched, his joints protesting after hours of sitting. Before we talk about Dr. Winters in my current situation, there's one more aspect of the past you should know about, he said, something I've never fully shared with you. Emily looked up, curious. What is it? Let me show you. Richard moved to his desk and unlocked the bottom drawer with a small key from his pocket. He removed a thick folder labeled simply medical. These are records from your illness, he explained, setting the folder on the desk. And the financial documents related to your treatment. Emily opened the folder, finding medical reports, hospital bills, insurance claim denials, and payment arrangements spanning several years. The amounts were staggering hundreds of thousands of dollars. Dad, she whispered, how did you possibly manage this? Richard sat back down, his expression somber. It wasn't easy. The experimental treatment wasn't covered by insurance. I appealed, of course, but they held firm. Said it was unproven, investigational. So how ... I sold our house, as I mentioned. Got a decent price, but the housing market wasn't great in 2010. Cashed out my retirement accounts, which meant significant penalties. Sold my car, bought that old Honda I drove for years, borrowed from your Aunt Maggie. Took out a second mortgage on the new, much smaller house. Picked up consulting jobs on weekends. Emily flipped through the documents, seeing payment. Plans, loan agreements, credit card statements showing balances that made her wince. You went into massive debt for me, she said, the reality sinking in. I would have sold everything I owned, would have lived in a cardboard box if it meant saving you, Richard said simply. There was no choice to make, Emily. But how did we survive afterward? I don't remember us ever being poor. Richard smiled faintly. That was by design. I wanted your childhood to be normal, not shadowed by financial stress. The truth is, for several years after your treatment, things were very tight. I took on extra work whenever possible. We lived frugally, though I tried to make it seem like natural choices rather than necessity. Remember how we always backed picnics for outings instead of eating at restaurants? How our vacations were camping trips rather than flights to tourist destinations? Emily nodded slowly, memories shifting into new perspective. By the time you were in middle school, things had improved, Richard continued. The architecture firm was doing well. I paid off the worst of the debts, refinanced others. Started rebuilding retirement savings, created your college fund. By your high school years, we were genuinely financially stable again, not just keeping up appearances. Emily found a document in the folder that made her pause, a statement showing withdrawal from something called the Emily's Future Fund. What was this? She asked, pointing to the paper. Richard's expression softened. That was a savings account I started when you were born. Your mother and I both contributed to it monthly. It was supposed to be for your college education. When you got sick, it was one of the first things I liquidated to pay for treatment. Mom contributed to this? Emily asked, surprised. Her mother had left when she was a toddler, had never been part of her life that she could remember. Yes, Richard said. Whatever her failings as a mother, Jessica did care in her way. She wasn't equipped for parenthood, too young, too focused on her career. But she did help set up that fund before she left. Did she know? When I was sick, did anyone tell her? Richard hesitated. I tried to contact her. Her parents gave me an email address. I sent updates during the worst of it, but I never heard back. I don't know if she received them, or if she read them but couldn't face responding. Emily absorbed this, another piece of her history she'd never known. I'm sorry you had to bear all of this alone, Dad. I wasn't entirely alone, Richard corrected. Your Aunt Maggie was a rock. Martin and Sarah from the firm helped enormously covering. For me when I needed to be at the hospital, bringing meals, helping with practical things. Dr. Abrams went far beyond her professional role. And there was a support group for parents of children with cancer. They understood what no one else could. Emily continued looking through the folder, finding more evidence of her father's hidden struggles. Medical leave documentation from his firm. Letters from creditors. A notice of foreclosure proceedings that must have been resolved somehow, as she had no memory of losing their home. There were some dark times, Richard acknowledged, seeing her reaction to the documents. Moments when the financial pressure, combined with the terror of possibly losing you, felt overwhelming. I had a few panic attacks during that period. Ended up in the ER once myself, thought I was having a heart attack. Turned out to be anxiety. You never told me any of this. Emily said, you were a child and later a teenager? It wasn't your burden to carry? But all these years I had no idea what you went through, what you sacrificed. That was intentional, Richard said gently. I wanted you to focus on living your life, not feeling indebted for having been saved. Emily closed the folder, tears in her eyes. I am indebted, though. How could I not be? No, Richard said firmly. That's not how this works. Parents make sacrifices for their children, financial, emotional, physical. That's the job. You don't owe me anything for doing what any loving parent would do. But not every parent would have done what you did, Emily insisted. The total dedication, the complete sacrifice of your own needs and future security. Richard smiled. But I'm not interested in comparing myself to other parents. I did what I needed to do for my child, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Emily was quiet for a moment, processing everything she'd learned. Then she asked, were there health issues? For you, I mean during this time or afterward, things you never told me about? Richard hesitated, then nodded. Some. The stress took a toll. I developed hypertension, had to start medication, had trouble sleeping for years, still do sometimes. There was a period during your early remission when I developed shingles from the chronic stress. Quite painful, but I hid the worst of it from you. How? Emily asked. I don't remember you being sick. I scheduled the worst of it during a 2-week period when you were at summer camp, Richard explained. By the time you came home, I was past the contagious stage and could manage the pain without you noticing. Emily shook her head, amazed and disturbed by how much her father had concealed from her. No more secrets, she reminded him. From now on, we face things together, your health, my career, struggles, all of it. Deal? Deal, Richard agreed. He replaced the folder in the desk drawer, which brings us to the present situation. My appointment. With Dr. Winters that I missed your exhibition for. Emily straightened, giving him her full attention. Yes, tell me everything. Richard took a deep breath. The news wasn't as bad as I'd feared, actually. The MRI showed no significant changes. From the previous scan, the cognitive tests showed some decline in short-term memory function, but my long-term memory is still intact. Dr. Winters increased my medication dosage and added some new memory exercises to my daily routine. So, what's the prognosis? Emily asked. Uncertain, Richard admitted. That's the challenge with MCI. For some people, it stabilizes and doesn't progress significantly for many years. For others, it develops into more serious cognitive impairment over time, and the treatment options limited currently. Medication to improve blood flow to the brain, cognitive exercises, regular monitoring. There are some experimental treatments Dr. Winters mentioned, but they're in early stages. Emily nodded, taking this in. When is your next appointment? I want to come with you. 3 weeks from now, Richard said. I'd appreciate having you there. I'll be there, Emily promised. And in the meantime, we'll start working on systems to help you manage the memory issues. Together, Richard smiled, relief evident in his expression. Together sounds good. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard. Inside, father and daughter sat surrounded by journals, medical records, And financial documents, the physical evidence of a journey shared, a battle fought, sacrifices made and hidden. Now finally brought into. The light got 2 days after her discovery of the journals. Emily sat in her father's study, a fresh notebook open in front of her. Richard was at the architecture firm, having returned to work with Emily's insistence that she needed some time alone to process everything she'd learned. The truth was, she also needed time to develop a plan. Her father had spent 15 years documenting her life. Now it was her turn to help document his, to create systems that would support his memory as it became less reliable. She'd spent the morning researching mild cognitive impairment, learning about strategies, aids, and technologies that could help. Now she was organizing her thoughts, creating a structured approach to supporting her father while respecting his independence as she worked. Her mind kept returning to the exhibition, her show at the Hartwell Gallery 3 days ago, the one her father had missed because of his appointment with Dr. Winters, the exhibition she'd accused him of forgetting, the argument that had led to her discovery of the journals. Emily reached for the most recent journal, the one she'd originally taken from her father's desk. She hadn't finished reading it, distracted by the earlier volumes and the revelations about her father's health. Now she turned to the entry from the day of her exhibition, May 18th, 2025. Follow up with Dr. Winters today. Had to miss Emily's. Exhibition couldn't figure out how to be in two places at once, and disappointment was too important to reschedule. New MR shows no significant changes from last scan. Good news. Cognitive tests show slight decline in short-term memory. Function, but long-term memory still intact. Increased medication dosage. Added new memory exercises to daily routine. Emily was upset about me missing her show. Can't blame her. Couldn't tell her the truth, not ready for that conversation yet. Need to know more before I burden her with this. The look of disappointment on her face when I made my excuse harder than any medical news. She thinks I don't care enough to remember her important moments. The truth is, I'm terrified of forgetting them. After the appointment, drove to the Hartwell Gallery. Exhibition would have been in full swing, but I couldn't bring myself to go in, not after missing the opening, not after our argument sat in. The parking lot instead, trying to gather courage. Finally walked around to the side window where I could see in without being seen. Emily was there, talking to a group of gallery goers. Gesturing to her largest piece, the triptych she's been working on for months, she looked confident, professional. Wanted to go in, apologize, explain. Couldn't do it. Shame, I suppose. Drove. Home instead. We'll try to make it up to her somehow. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she read. He had gone to the gallery. Not inside, but he'd been there, watching her from outside. She continued reading, finding the entry from the following day. May 19th, 2025. Called Martin this morning. Asked him to visit the exhibition and give me details. He's known about my memory issues from the beginning. Had to tell someone at the firm. Martin went during lunch. Texted me photos of each piece. Gave me his impressions. Saw there was good attendance, positive reactions. Emily's triptych drawing the most attention. Tried calling Emily again, still not answering. Can't blame her. Found the gift I'd bought for her exhibition success, sitting wrapped on my dresser. Had it for weeks. Selected specifically for this occasion. A set of Japanese brushes she's been coveting. Imported directly from Kyoto. Now I don't know when or if I'll give it to her. The distance between us feels vast today. Emily sat down. The journal, tears welling in her eyes. The Japanese brushes, she'd seen them in an art supply catalog months ago. Mentioned them casually to her father, never expecting him to remember. Much less to order them from Japan. She picked up her phone and called the architecture firm. Caldwell. And Associates, the receptionist answered. Hi, Susan. It's Emily. Is my dad available? He's in a meeting, but he should be done in about 15 minutes. Want me to have him call you? No, that's okay. I'll come by. Just don't tell him I'm coming. Okay. Sure thing, honey. See you soon. Emily arrived at the firm 20 minutes later. She hadn't been to her father's office in months, though she'd spent countless hours there as a child, drawing at the conference table while he worked late, getting to know the staff who had become like extended family over the years. Susan smiled warmly as she entered. He just finished his meeting. Going back. Emily walked through the familiar office to her father's corner. Space. The door was open and Richard was at his desk, reviewing blueprints. He looked up as she appeared in the doorway, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. Emily, this is unexpected. I've been reading more of your journal, she said without preamble, about the exhibition. Richard's expression sobered. Ah, you came to the gallery, not inside, he clarified. I couldn't. After argument, I sat in the parking lot, then looked in through the window. I wanted to be there, Emily. I just couldn't bring myself to come in at that point. And the Japanese brushes? You ordered them for me? Richard looked startled. You read about those. Two? Where are they dead? At home, in my dresser drawer. I wasn't sure when or if you'd want them now. Emily moved into the office and sat in a chair across from his desk. Why didn't you tell me about the appointment? The real reason. You missed the exhibition? Richard sighed. Pride, I suppose? Fear? I didn't want you to see me differently, to worry about me, to see me as diminished somehow. I would never see you that way, Emily said firmly. I know that now, Richard acknowledged. I should have trusted you more. Yes, you should have. Emily reached across the desk and took his hand. I would have rescheduled the exhibition opening if I'd known about your appointment, or at least understood why you couldn't be there. I know. I handled it badly. I'm sorry. Emily squeezed his hand. I've been doing research this morning about MCI, about memory systems and aids. I'm going to help you, Dad. We're going to figure this out together. Richard's eyes grew moist. Thank you. And I want to see the exhibition with you, Emily continued. It's still running for another week. We'll go together. You can see my work properly, not through a window from the parking lot. I'd like that. Richard said, tomorrow evening, after you finish work? Perfect. Emily stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. The triptych at the center of my exhibition. The one Martin told you was drawing the most attention? Yes. It's called Remission. It's about survival, about living beyond the expected end. I didn't know the full story of my illness when I created it. Didn't know I was given 6 months to live. Didn't know about the experimental treatment that saved me. But somehow, I think I've always known I was living a life I wasn't supposed to have. The piece is about that, about borrowed time, about defying endings. Richard stared at her, visibly moved. I can't wait to see it. Tomorrow, Emily promised. And Dad? Bring the brushes? The following evening, Richard and Emily stood together in the Hartwell Gallery. The space was quiet, only a few other visitors moving slowly among the displayed artworks. Emily led her father to the center of the main room, where the triptych hung on the largest wall. 3 large canvases connected to form a single image. Stylized human figure emerging from a tangle of medical imagery, tubes and monitors. Giving way to vibrant constraint transforming into freedom. The progression from left to right showed darkness yielding to light, confinement to liberation, sickness to health. Richard stood motionless before it, taking in every detail, every brushstroke. It's extraordinary, he said finally, his voice low with emotion. You've captured it perfectly, without even knowing the full story. Some things we know in our bones, Emily said. Some memories live in our cells, not just our minds. Richard nodded, understanding. Like my memories of you. Will always live somewhere in me, even if my mind becomes less reliable. Exactly. They moved through the rest of the exhibition together. Richard studying each piece with careful attention, asking questions, offering observations. Emily watching him see her work through new eyes, not just as their supportive father, but as someone recognizing the thread of their shared story woven through her art as they prepared to leave. Richard handed her a wrapped package. I believe this is long overdue. Emily opened it to find the set of Japanese brushes, each one a work of art in itself, handcrafted with tradition and precision. They're beautiful, she whispered. Thank you. Not just for the exhibition, Richard said. For everything you are, everything you've become. For the artist who emerged from that sick little girl. For the daughter who's grown into my greatest pride. Emily hugged him tightly, the brushes clutched in one hand. I'll use them too. Tell our story, she promised. In my way, as you've told it in yours. They walked out of the gallery together, father and daughter, bound by blood and history, by journals and art, by a shared journey that had brought them through illness and health, misunderstanding and revelation, secrets and truth, and ahead. Of them, a new chapter was beginning to take shape. The next morning, Emily sat at her father's kitchen table, a new leather-bound journal open before her. The cover was a deep blue, embossed with the year. Richard's journals were black. She'd chosen blue to differentiate her perspective. She uncapped her pen and began to write. June 1st, 2025, Today, I'm starting my own journal about Dad. After discovering his 15 years of documenting my life, it seems only right to return the favor now that he needs it. This is a record of who he is, what he loves, what matters to him, and a way for me to help him hold on to. His memories as his condition progresses. Dad likes his coffee with just a splash of cream, no sugar. He takes it to his study every morning and reads the news online for exactly 30 minutes before starting work. This habit hasn't changed in at least 10 years. When I was in high school, I used to time my appearance at breakfast to coincide with the end of his news time. When he was ready to engage with the day, his favorite meal is still lasagna with garlic bread. He pretends he's cutting back on carbs, but he always accepts a second piece of garlic bread if offered. This makes him happy in a small, uncomplicated way. He still wears the watch Grandpa gave him when he graduated from architecture school. The band has been replaced 3 times, but the face is original. He touches it unconsciously when he's anxious, or deep in thought, a gesture I don't think he's aware of. Emily paused, reflecting on these small details that made up the fabric of her father's daily life. The kinds of things he had documented about her for years, preferences, habits, quirks that might seem insignificant, but together formed a portrait of a person. She continued writing. Dad's memory issues are most noticeable in the evenings, when he's tired. Mornings are his sharpest time. He gets frustrated when he can't find the right word, but tries to hide it with humor. I've noticed he sometimes avoids certain topics or conversations that might reveal his struggles. Need to create a safe environment where he doesn't feel he has to hide these moments. Today, I'm going to start implementing some memory systems around the house. Calendar in the kitchen with important dates highlighted. Medication organizer with morning, evening compartments. Labels on some cabinets, subtle but helpful. I'll introduce these gradually, frame them as organization for both of us rather than aids just for him. Most importantly, I need to document his stories. The ones he's told me over the years about his childhood, his college days, his early career, the memories that matter most to him. I'll record these systematically. Preserve them the way he preserved my life. Emily closed the journal when she heard her father's footsteps on the stairs. She'd moved back into her childhood home temporarily, just for a few weeks while we get systems in place, she told him, though both suspected it might be longer. Morning, Richard said, as he entered the kitchen, heading straight for the coffee pot. You're up early. I had some things I wanted to write down, Emily said, not hiding the journal. Starting my own record-keeping project. Richard glanced at the blue journal, understanding dawning in his eyes. I see. Too weird? Emily asked, suddenly uncertain. No, Richard said after a moment. Not weird, just the situation reversed. Takes some getting used to. Emily nodded. For me too? They moved around the kitchen together, preparing breakfast with the easy familiarity of people who have shared a space for years. As they ate, Emily broached the subject she'd been considering since reading about her father's diagnosis. I've been thinking about my studio, she said. The rent is expensive, and it's a 20-minute drive from here. What about it? Richard asked. I'm wondering if it makes sense to set up a studio here instead. The sunroom would work. Good light, enough space. We could move your drawing table in there too, so you could work on architectural sketches while I paint, like we used to do when I was younger. Richard looked at her over his coffee cup. Emily, you don't need to rearrange your life for me. I'm managing. The diagnosis isn't a death sentence. I know that, Emily said. This isn't just about your memory issues. It's about priorities, perspective, learning what you went through. When I was sick, seeing how you organized your entire life around giving me a good childhood despite everything, it's made me think about what really matters. And what's that? Richard asked. Time together? Emily said simply. Creating together, being present for each other. My career can develop just as well from a studio here as from my rented space. Maybe better, with fewer financial pressures. Richard was quiet for a moment, considering. If you're sure it's what you want, I think it's a wonderful idea. But only if you're doing it for the right reasons, not out of obligation or worry. Multiple reasons can be true at once, Emily pointed out. Can I be concerned about you and want to save on rent and like the idea of us working together in the same space? Because all of those things are true, Richard smiled. When did you get so wise? Had a good teacher, Emily said, returning his smile. After breakfast, Emily showed Richard her journal. I'm documenting you now, she explained. Your habits, preferences, stories, things you might want to remember if they become harder to access in your mind. Richard looked touched. That's thank you. But you don't need to. I want T.O., Emily interrupted. You spent 15 years documenting my life. Let me do this for you now. Richard nodded, accepting her determination. What would you like to know? Everything, Emily said. Starting with the stories you've told me about your childhood. I want to get the details right, preserve them accurately. Then your college. Years, how you met Mom, your early career. The parts of your life I wasn't there for. That's a lot of material, Richard observed. We have time, Emily said confidently. And I'm a quick study. Over the next few days, Emily continued her journal, recording her father's routines and preferences, noting when his memory seemed sharper or more challenged, documenting the stories he shared during their evening conversations. She set up the promised memory systems around the house, subtle but effective aids that Richard initially resisted but gradually came to appreciate. She cleared out the sunroom, transforming it into a shared studio space with her easel by the east windows and her father's drawing table by the west. She brought her art supplies from her rented studio, arranging them methodically on new shelving units. Richard contributed his architectural materials, and soon the room became a creative workspace for both of them. On Friday evening, Emily left her journal open on the kitchen table while she showered. When she returned, she found Richard sitting there reading what she had written. She paused in the doorway, uncertain whether to be upset at the invasion of privacy or amused at the irony. Sorry, Richard said, looking up. Curiosity got the better of me. Now you know how it feels, Emily said, but there was no anger in her voice. It's strange seeing myself through your eyes, Richard admitted. The details you notice, the way you describe me, good strange or bad strange? Good, I think. Though, it's humbling to have my weaknesses documented so carefully alongside my strengths. Emily sat across from him. That's what makes it real. That's what you did for me, the complete picture, not just the highlight reel. Richard nodded, running his fingers over her handwriting. You've captured things about me I wasn't aware of, habits, gestures, the way I apparently touch my watch when I'm anxious. Do I really do that? All the time, Emily confirmed. You're doing it now? Richard looked down, surprised to find his fingers on his watch band. He laughed. I had no idea. That's the value of another perspective, Emily said. We can't see ourselves completely. We need others to reflect back the full picture. Richard closed her journal, sliding it back to her. Thank you for this, for seeing me so clearly, for being willing to document the journey ahead, whatever it brings. You taught me how, Emily said, through your journals, through your example. That night, before bed, Emily made a new entry in her journal, June 5th, 2025. Dad found my journal today and read some entries. I wasn't up, it seemed fitting somehow, given how I discovered his journals. We talked about perspective, about the way we see each other versus how we see ourselves. He was surprised by some of my observations, particularly the unconscious habits I've noticed. Today was a good day for his memory. No noticeable gaps, no searching for words. He worked on a design project in our new shared studio while I organized my supplies. It felt right, being in the same space, each absorbed in our own creative work put together. Like closing a circle that began when I was a child, drawing at his feet while he worked. I'm starting to understand why his journals became so important to him. There's something powerful about bearing witness to another person's life, about preserving the details that might otherwise be lost to time or fading memory. It's an act of love, of attention. The kind of attention that says, you matter. Every detail of you matters. You are seen and known and remembered. Tomorrow we begin. Recording his stories systematically, childhood first, then progressing chronologically. I've set up audio recording equipment as well, so we'll have his voice telling these stories, not just my written account. His voice, his laugh, his particular way of pausing before making an important point. These are as much a part of him as the content of the stories themselves. I don't know what the future holds, how his condition will progress. But I know that whatever memories he may lose, they won't be truly gone. They'll live in his journals about me, in my journal about him, in the recordings we're making, in the artwork we create together in our shared studio. Memory isn't just what we hold in our minds. It's what we preserve through our actions, our creative works, our impact on others. By that measure, Dad's memory will never fade, no matter what happens to his cognitive function. His influence, his love, his perspective, these live on in me. In everything I am and everything I create, Emily closed the journal and set her pen aside. Tomorrow they would begin the systematic recording of her father's life story. Tonight, she felt a sense of peace, of purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, preserving what mattered most along the way. 3 weeks later, Emily sat beside her father in Dr. Winter's waiting room. She'd been preparing for this appointment, researching MCI, creating a list of questions, and carefully documenting her observations of her father's memory patterns over the past weeks. Nervous? Richard asked, noticing her tapping foot. A little, Emily admitted. I want to understand everything, ask the right questions. Dr. Winters is good, Richard assured her. Direct, but compassionate. You'll like him. A nurse appeared. In the doorway, Richard Caldwell. Dr. Winters is ready for you. They followed her to an office where a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses rose to greet them. Richard, good to see you. And this must be Emily. Yes, Richard confirmed. My daughter wanted to join us today. Doctor. Winters shook Emily's hand. I'm glad you're here. Support systems are crucial in managing cognitive changes. The doctor gestured for them to sit, then reviewed Richard's chart. I see you've been following the medication regimen we discussed. Any noticeable effects? Side effects? The dizziness I mentioned last time has improved, Richard reported. As for effectiveness, it's hard to tell. Some days seem better than others. That's typical, Dr. Winters said. And how about the cognitive exercises? Have you been consistent with those? Very, Emily interjected. We've been doing them together every morning. I've been tracking his performance. She handed the doctor several pages of notes. Dr. Winters looked impressed as he scanned her documentation. This is excellent data, Emily. Much more detailed than what most patients provide. We've started implementing memory systems at home, too, Emily continued. Calendar management, medication tracking, visual cues for important information. And we're recording his life stories, audio, and written documentation. Dr. Winters nodded approvingly. You've taken a very proactive approach. That's exactly what I recommend. He turned to Richard. How are you feeling about all this support? Sometimes patients find it overwhelming or infantilizing. Richard considered the question. Initially, I resisted. Didn't want to be managed. But Emily has been skillful in how she's introduced these changes, framing them as organizing systems for both of us, not just aids for me. And this story recording project, that's been genuinely enjoyable. Good, Dr. Winters said. Finding that balance is important. He turned back to Emily. Based on your observations, what patterns have you noticed with your father's memory issues? Emily consulted her notes. Mornings are definitely his strongest time, cognitively. Fatigue is a major factor by evening. Word-finding difficulties increase noticeably. Stress also impacts function. Emotional memories seem most resilient, while recent information names, appointments, where he put things, those are the most vulnerable. Dr. Winters nodded. That aligns with typical MCI patterns. The emotional memory resilience is actually a good sign. It suggests the hippocampus isn't as affected as some other brain regions. He turned to Richard. I'd like to run some cognitive assessments today. Repeat the tests we did last time to track any changes. Then we should discuss some new research findings that might interest you. The testing took about 45 minutes. Emily sat quietly, observing as her father worked through memory tasks. Word associations, problem-solving exercises, and spatial reasoning tests. She could see his frustration when he struggled, the momentary flashes of uncertainty, but also his determination to perform well. When they returned to Dr. Winters' office to discuss the results, the doctor's expression was cautiously positive. Overall, I'm not seeing significant decline from your last assessment, he told Richard. Some areas have actually improved slightly, which may reflect the medication, the cognitive exercises, or the support systems you've implemented. That's encouraging, Richard said, visibly relieved. It is, Dr. Winters agreed. Though I want to be clear, MCI is generally progressive. We're not talking about a cure here, but potentially slowing the progression and maximizing function. We understand, Emily said. What about the research you mentioned? Dr. Winters leaned forward. There's a clinical trial starting at the University Medical Center. They're testing a new approach for MCI that combines medication with cognitive training and transcranial magnetic stimulation. Magnetic stimulation? Richard asked, sounding skeptical. It's not invasive, Dr. Winters explained. Uses magnetic fields to stimulate specific brain regions. Early results from smaller studies have been promising, showing improvement in memory function, not just slow decline. What would it involve? Emily asked. 3 sessions per week for 8 weeks initially. Each session includes cognitive training exercises followed by TMS treatment. Then maintenance sessions once weekly for 6 months. There are regular assessments throughout. Side effects? Richard asked. Minimal in the preliminary studies. Some participants reported mild headaches after sessions, but these typically resolved quickly. Is this covered by insurance? Emily asked, remembering the financial documents she'd seen, the sacrifices her father had made for her treatment. Partially, Dr. Winters said. As a clinical trial, the treatment itself is provided at no cost, but there are associated evaluations and tests that may have out-of-pocket expenses. Nothing approaching the cost of a standard treatment program, though. Emily and Richard exchanged a look. We'd like more information, Richard said. To consider it carefully, of course. Dr. Winters handed them a folder. All the details are here, including eligibility criteria, schedule, potential risks, and benefits. The trial starts in 3 weeks. Given your current status in medical history, I believe you'd be an excellent candidate, Richard. Thank you, Richard said. We'll review this and let you know. As they left the medical building, Emily linked her arm through her father's. What do you think about the trial? Richard was quiet for a moment. I'm cautiously interested, but also wary of false hope. New treatments often promise more than they deliver. True, Emily acknowledged. But without the experimental treatment I received as a child, I wouldn't be here having this conversation with you. Richard squeezed her arm. A fair point. We don't have to decide today, Emily said. Let's review the materials, do some research, talk it through. Over the next week, they did exactly that. Emily researched transcranial magnetic stimulation, finding peer-reviewed studies that suggested genuine potential. They discussed the time commitment, the potential benefits, the possibility of disappointment. The way I see it, Emily said one evening as they sat in their shared studio, her at her easel, him at his drawing table. It's worth trying. Even if it only helps a little, that's something. And it might help others too through what the researchers learn. It would be a significant time commitment, Richard pointed out. 3 sessions a week initially. You'd have to drive me since they recommend not driving immediately after treatment. I've already thought about that, Emily said. I can arrange my schedule around it. The studio being here makes that possible. Richard was quiet, studying the architectural sketch he'd been working on. Finally, he looked up. 15 years ago, I pursued an experimental treatment for you against considerable odds. It seems fitting that you're now advocating for me to do the same. Full circle, Emily said softly. Yes, Richard nodded. Let's do it. Let's call Dr. Winters tomorrow and tell him I want to participate in the trial. Emily smiled, relief and hope mingling in her expression. I think that's the right decision. I do too, Richard said. And if it doesn't work, if my memory continues to decline despite our best efforts, then we'll face that together, Emily said firmly. Just as you faced my illness all those years ago. One day at a time, documenting what matters, preserving what we can. Richard reached across the space between their work areas and squeezed her hand. One day at a time, he agreed. Richard's participation in the clinical trial began in July. 3 mornings a week, Emily drove him to the University Medical Center where he underwent cognitive training exercises followed by the transcranial magnetic stimulation treatment. The routine quickly became familiar, the same parking spot when possible, the same route through the medical building, friendly greetings from the research team who came to know them both. After each session, they would stop at the same cafe near the medical center. Richard would have black coffee and a scone. Emily would have chai tea and whatever pastry looked most appealing that day. They began calling these their treatment debriefs, a time to discuss how the session had gone, how Richard was feeling, any changes or observations. What I like about the cognitive training is that it feels like I'm actively participating in my own treatment. Richard commented during one of these post-session conversations, not just passively receiving medication or magnetic pulses. The researchers said that active engagement is a key component, Emily reminded him. The combination of approaches is what they're testing. By the 4th week of treatment, they began noticing subtle improvements. Richard was finding words more easily, especially in the afternoons when fatigue had previously affected him most noticeably. His ability to remember recent conversations improved. though he still relied on the calendar and reminder systems Emily had established at home. They continued their own memory-supporting rituals. Each evening after dinner, they would sit in the living room for what they called story time. Emily would select a topic from the list they had created: Richard's childhood in Minnesota, his college years, his early career struggles, his meeting and brief marriage to Emily's mother, his process of becoming a single father. She would ask questions, guiding him through his memories, recording his responses both in her journal and with a small digital recorder. Sometimes they would look at old photographs as they talked, or Richard would sketch something to illustrate a point: the layout of his childhood home, the design of his first architectural project. I think I've told you most of these stories before, Richard said one evening as they finished a session about his college years. Some of them, Emily acknowledged, but never in such detail and never systematically documented. Besides, I love hearing them again. It's like when I was little and wanted the same bedtime story night after night. Richard smiled at the comparison. I remember that. The Velveteen Rabbit for what felt like months straight. That's still one of my favorites, Emily admitted. The idea of becoming real through being loved. You were always real to me, Richard said softly. From the first moment I held you. These evening sessions often led to deeper conversations, revelations that might otherwise never have surfaced. Richard shared regrets and triumphs, moments of doubt and moments of clarity that had shaped his life and his parenting. I was terrified. When your mother left, he admitted during one session, not just about the practical challenges of being a single father, but about whether I could give you everything you needed, whether I could be enough. You were more than enough, Emily assured him. I never felt I was missing anything essential. As the weeks passed, they established another ritual. Sunday evenings became journal exchange time. They would swap journals. Richard would read what Emily had written about him that week, and Emily would read his latest entries about her. It feels vulnerable, Richard acknowledged after the first exchange, knowing you're reading my unfiltered thoughts. I felt the same way, Emily said. But there's something powerful about it too, about being fully seen and known by someone you trust. The journal exchange sometimes led to clarifications or corrections. I didn't mean it quite that way, one of them might say. Or, is that really how you saw that situation? But more often it led to deeper understanding, to seeing events and interactions through each other's eyes. One Sunday in August, as they sat with their swapped journals, Richard looked up with an expression of surprise. You've started dating again? He asked. Jason from the gallery? Emily blushed slightly. We've had coffee a few times. It's not serious. You didn't mention it, Richard observed. I wasn't sure if it was worth mentioning yet, Emily explained. And I didn't want you to worry that I was distracted from all of this. She gestured vaguely, encompassing the treatment they shared. Living arrangement, the support systems they'd established. Emily, Richard said gently, your life doesn't stop because of my condition. I don't want you putting everything on hold for me. I'm not, Emily assured him. But finding balance is complicated. Tell me about him, Richard encouraged. Is he good enough for my daughter? Should I run a background check? His eyes twinkled with humor. Emily laughed. Don't you dare. He's the assistant curator at the Hartwell Gallery. We met during my exhibition. He's smart, kind, interested in my work. It's very new, very casual, but nice. I'm glad, Richard said sincerely. You deserve nice. Their journal exchange ritual evolved to include not just reading, but discussing what they'd written, sharing perspectives, deepening their understanding of each other's experience. It became a way of processing the week together, of maintaining connection even as their individual lives continued to unfold. By September, 2 months into the clinical trial, the researchers noted measurable improvements in Richard's cognitive function. His scores on memory assessments had improved significantly, particularly in areas related to short-term recall and verbal fluency. The results are encouraging, Dr. Kim, the lead researcher, told them during a progress review. Richard is showing one of the strongest responses in the trial group. Is it sustainable? Emily asked. Will the improvements last? That's what the maintenance phase will help us determine, Doctor. Kim explained. After the intensive 8-week treatment, we'll transition to weekly sessions for 6 months. We'll continue to monitor function and assess whether the gains hold steady, continue to improve, or begin to decline again. Richard took this news with cautious optimism. I feel more present, he told Emily as they drove home from the appointment. less foggy, especially in the evenings. But I'm trying not to get too excited. This could be temporary. Even if it is, Emily said, we've learned so much about how to support your memory function. The systems we put in place, the documentation we're creating, those benefits remain regardless of what happens with the treatment results. True, Richard acknowledged. And there's another benefit I hadn't anticipated. What's that? This whole experience, my diagnosis, your discovery of the journals, our new arrangements and rituals, it's brought us closer, given us a new kind of relationship. Emily smiled, keeping her eyes on the road. Partners, she said. Exactly, Richard agreed. Supporting each other through whatever comes next. That evening, they celebrated the positive trial results with a special dinner. As they raised their glasses in a toast, Richard's expression grew thoughtful. I've been thinking about our journals, he said, about all this documentation we've been creating. What about it? Emily asked. Maybe it could help others, families dealing with memory issues, or parents and children trying to understand each other better. Our story, your illness, my documentation, your discovery of the journals. Now my memory challenges and our shared approach to facing them. You mean publish them? Share them publicly? Emily asked, surprised. Not all of them, obviously. Selected portions, edited for privacy. But the essence of the journey, the process we've developed, that might be valuable to others. Emily considered this. It's an interesting idea. We could create something together, excerpts from your journals, portions of mine, maybe with connecting, narrative or reflection. Would you be comfortable with that? Richard asked, having parts of your life story shared. If it could help others? Yes, Emily said. Though we need to be thoughtful about what to include. Of course, Richard agreed. It's just an idea at this stage. A good one, Emily said. Let's keep thinking about it. That night, they each made entries in their respective journals, documenting the positive treatment results, the celebration dinner, and the new idea of possibly sharing their story with others someday. A new layer to their shared ritual of memory keeping, extending beyond themselves to the possibility. Touching other lives. 6 months later, on a crisp December evening, the Hartwell Gallery was transformed. The space that had hosted Emily's exhibition in May, the one her father had viewed only through a window, was now filled with a new collection of artwork and artifacts, illuminated by soft lighting and buzzing with conversation. Nervous? Richard asked, straightening his tie as they prepared to enter. Terrified, Emily admitted. This is the most personal work I've ever shown. It's extraordinary, Richard assured her, no matter what anyone else thinks. They took a deep breath together, then entered the gallery where Emily's new exhibition, titled The Memory Keepers, was about to officially open. The main gallery wall displayed a series of paintings, inspired by Emily's childhood illness and recovery, as seen through the dual lens of her father's journals and her own fragmented memories. Medical imagery transformed into abstract forms, hospital scenes rendered in unexpected color palettes. The sterile and clinical made somehow beautiful without diminishing the fear and pain. Another section featured paired paintings, architectural sketches of meaningful places from their shared history alongside Emily's artistic interpretations of the same locations, their childhood home, the hospital where she had been treated, the lake where they had vacationed each summer, the university where she had studied art. Each pairing offered two perspectives on the same physical space, a visual dialogue between father and daughter. The centerpiece of the exhibition, however, was the installation that occupied the galleries. Central space, a circular arrangement of reading podiums, each holding an open journal selections from Richard's 15 years of documentation, paired with excerpts from Emily's newer journal about him. Visitors could move from podium to podium, reading these personal reflections, seeing the same events and relationship from both perspectives. Behind this circle of journals stood a small structure resembling a miniature studio, with two work areas, an easel, and a drawing table facing each other across the space. The walls of this mock studio were covered with Emily's sketches of Richard working, his drawings of her creating art, their collaborative visual projects, all created in their shared sunroom studio over the past 6 months. The exhibition represented not just Emily's artistic vision, but their shared journey through illness and health, separation and reunion, misunderstanding and revelation. Emily, Richard, Jason, now the full curator of the Hartwell Gallery, approached with a broad smile. The final arrangements look perfect. Are you ready to open the doors? There's quite a crowd gathering. Emily glanced at her father, who nodded encouragingly. "We're ready," she said, as the doors opened and visitors began to flow in. Emily and Richard stood together near the entrance, greeting friends, colleagues, and art enthusiasts. Dr. Abrams, retired now but still a presence in their lives, arrived, early with a bouquet of flowers. Martin and Sarah from Richard's firm came with a group of coworkers. Several of the researchers from the clinical trial attended, genuinely interested in seeing how their medical work had influenced this creative expression. "This is remarkable," Dr. Kim said as she examined the journal installation. "The connection between memory preservation, cognitive function, and creative expression, it's exactly what we've been studying from the medical perspective. But you've captured it artistically." As the evening progressed, Emily circulated through the gallery, explaining her process, answering questions, accepting both praise and thoughtful critique. Richard moved more slowly through the space, sometimes participating in conversations, sometimes stepping back to observe the visitors' reactions to the deeply personal exhibition near the journal installation. Richard found himself standing beside Dr. Winters, who had arrived without announcement and was reading one of the displayed journal entries. "I hope you don't mind my coming," the neurologist said. "When Emily sent the invitation, I was intrigued." "We're glad you're here," Richard assured him. "You're part of this story, too." Dr. Winters gestured to the journals. "How has the combined approach been working? The clinical trial treatments along with your home-based memory systems?" "Better than I expected," Richard admitted. "The cognitive improvements from the trial have held stable since completing the intensive phase. The weekly maintenance sessions seem to be reinforcing the gains. And the systems Emily and I developed, the journaling, the recording of memories, the visual cues and organization, those have become simply how we live now." "That's excellent," Dr. Winters said. "The combination of medical intervention and lifestyle adaptation is typically most effective." "The prognosis is still uncertain," Richard acknowledged. "We know that, but whatever comes, we have strategies now, and we have this." He gestured to the exhibition around them, our story, preserved in multiple forms. Across the gallery, Emily was speaking with a small group about the painting series depicting her childhood illness. "I had no memory of how serious it was," she explained. "My father had protected me from that knowledge. It was only when I discovered his journals that I learned I'd been given 6 months to live as a 5-year-old. That and experimental treatment had saved me." "That must have been shocking," one woman said. "It was," Emily agreed. "But it also helped me understand my father in a new way, his protective instincts, his attention to detail, his need to document everything about my life. He was preserving what he feared might be lost." "And now you're doing the same for him," a man observed, gesturing to the journal installation. "Yes," Emily said. "Though his condition isn't nearly as dire as mine was. The clinical trial he's participating in has shown promising results. But regardless of the medical outcome, we found that the process of documenting, of paying this particular kind of attention to each other's lives, has value in itself." As the evening continued, Emily noticed her father sitting alone on a bench in a quiet corner of the gallery. She joined him, taking his hand. "You okay?" she asked. "Just taking it all in," Richard said. "Seeing our private story displayed so publicly, it's powerful, a bit overwhelming." "Too much?" Emily asked, concerned. "No," Richard assured her. "Just ... significant. I started those journals thinking I was preserving memories of you that I would soon lose. Instead, they've become something neither of us could have imagined: art, therapy, a bridge between us, and now a public exhibition that might touch others." Emily leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture that had remained unchanged since her childhood. "Full circle," she said. "More like a spiral," Richard suggested. "Returning to similar points but at a different level, evolving." Later, as the exhibition began to wind down, Jason approached with a journalist from a prominent art magazine who wanted to interview them both. "Your exhibition has generated significant interest," the journalist explained. "The personal narrative combined with the artistic execution. It's compelling. We'd like to feature it in our next issue, perhaps with an exploration of the project you mentioned, publishing selected journal excerpts." "We'd be honored," Emily said, looking to her father for confirmation. He nodded. "The journals were private for 15 years, Richard told the journalist. "It seems fitting that in their 16th year, they become something else, something shared, something that might help others understand their own relationships, their own struggles with memory and documentation. That's beautifully put, the journalist said, making notes. May I quote you directly? Of course, Richard said as the last visitors departed and gallery staff began closing down for the night. Emily and Richard stood alone in the center. The exhibition, surrounded by the visual representation of their shared journey. Thank you, Emily said softly. For what? Richard asked. For keeping the journals all those years, for letting me find them, for being willing to share them now, to let our story become part of something larger. Richard smiled, his eyes crinkling. At the corners in the way Emily had documented in her journal, the expression she had described as pure dad, full of love and gentle humor. Thank you, he returned, for seeing me so clearly, for documenting me now as I documented you then, for becoming my memory keeper as I've been yours. They moved through the gallery together, turning off lights as they went, leaving their story preserved. In paint and ink, in canvas and paper, and shared memory and artistic vision to wait in the darkness for new viewers. New witnesses to their journey of forgetting and remembering, of loss and preservation, of the love that makes us real.